if inciting to insurrection isn't, then I don't really know what is.
Now, but if an impeachment resolution actually comes to the floor, won't many Republicans be hard-pressed to oppose it?
Yeah, listen, I think they're all going to have to vote their conscience and look at what happened. I mean, what we had was an incitement to riot at the United States Capitol. We had people killed, and to me, there's not a whole lot of question here. So, you know,
so you think it was an impeachable offense?
Before George. Oh, sure, yeah, and
you'd vote to impeach.
I think that, you know, well, that's, if I think it's an impeachable offense, that's exactly what I would do, George. But I'm not in there. But you want my opinion? That's my opinion. I think if inciting to insurrection isn't, then I don't really know what is. But I will say too that the Democrats, by what they did earlier on Ukraine, have kind of cheapened this a little bit too.
Now, but if an impeachment resolution actually comes to the floor, won't many Republicans be hard pressed to oppose
people and regular everyday people accountable for far less?
Cited it at the top, those special elections in Georgia at the beginning of the week, giving Democrats bare control of the Senate, a 50-50 tie right now. But that does play into the argument that I presented to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that you're hearing from some Democrats right now that, yes, the president should be impeached, but moving forward, the trial right now is going to cripple Joe Biden in the opening days of his presidency.
I don't think that's true. I think this is a moment where Joe Biden gets to show his strength. He is a leader. And what we need is someone who is going to say wrong is wrong. Justice is justice. The reality is we have a justice system that holds Black and brown people and regular everyday people accountable for far less. And so if he does not show a strong hand and justice in this situation, no one's going to care later what he has to say about anything else. He needs to be a leader here. And I don't think anybody agrees that that's him being partisan or political. That's him being the person who is supposed to keep us safe and make sure our institution does what it's supposed to do. Then we can get about the business of doing the work. And we know that as this is going on, people are suffering from COVID. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We watch Republicans with very little power, a lot less power than Joe Biden's going to have, do a lot of damage in 2 years. So Joe Biden is going to be able to do a lot of good, but it starts by making sure we are all on the same page about the safety and security of this country, what is right and what is wrong, and that we have a leader who understands that and realizes that we can't heal until we have full accountability and know that we're going to be safe going forward from not only this president, but all of the people who support what happened this week at the Capitol.
Chris.
He would strive to make Joe Biden the... Before the 2020 election, Senator Bernie Sanders told me that he would strive to make Joe Biden the most progressive president in the nation's history. That goal became a whole lot more plausible this past week as Democrats won both Senate runoff elections in Georgia, allowing them to retake control of Congress's upper chamber, the Senate. A unified government. Imagine that. Now, a lot of the Biden administration's policy plans are likely to come to fruition. So, too, are some progressive policies that previously had little hope of passing in a Republican-held Senate. One of the very first items on the docket is passing and signing a COVID relief bill that includes $2,000 direct payments to millions of Americans. Joining me now is Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator Sanders, good to see you. Interestingly enough, your partner, your Republican partner in trying to get bigger payments to Americans was Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who got really weird in the last week or so. But you do now have Democratic support to get these higher checks. So is that going to be first on your agenda?
Ali, we have to recognize that right now this country faces an unprecedented set of crises: the healthcare pandemic, the economy, climate change, the very threat to democracy. And what has got to happen is, to my mind, the Democratic Congress and President Biden are going to have to move aggressively to address these crises. And that means way up there. First order of business is to understand that people in America are struggling to feed their kids. They're struggling to prevent eviction. They're struggling to be able to afford to go to the doctor. First thing we got to do is make sure that every working class family in America gets, on top of that $600 that hopefully many families are now getting, they get another $1,400 per person, including children. Second of all, what we have got to do is not only address the immediate emergency, We got to work on job creation, creating millions of good paying jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure, and addressing the climate change crisis. We can create millions of jobs by retrofitting our homes, moving to many respects. Sustainable energy in many respects.
Let's talk about healthcare. This is the thing you and I have talked about for a very, very long time because we share a view on how there can be a better healthcare system. Obviously, you and Joe Biden don't exactly share the same view of what should happen, but you do definitely share a view that a lot more Americans should be insured than currently are. And that situation has only worsened because of coronavirus, because stupidly we connect healthcare to our jobs in this country. So lots of people have lost their jobs and a whole lot of people got coronavirus, which then puts them into the category of having pre-existing conditions and making it harder for them to get insurance. What's the working solution to this in the immediate and even the midterm future?
Look, Ali, I agree with you. At the end of the day, this current cruel, dysfunctional, and wasteful healthcare system has got to end. We need to do what Canada does. We need to do what countries all over the world do. Guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right, not a jobs benefit. End the absurdity of spending 10 times more in some cases.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Let me close out some windows so I don't have an echo. Can you hear me now? Hear me now? Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, great. I'm just going to bring in today, right now, I'm bringing in Jack Allison, co-host Jack Allison.
How are you, Katie? Good
I cannot hear you. Can everyone else hear him?
Oh, can you not?
Maria, can you hear him?
Oh,
Yes.
she can hear me. Okay,
you can hear him, but not me.
Okay.
Can you write me in the private chat?
They can hear
tab.
me.
Let me see if I muted the tab. I don't think I did though. Hold on. Oh, guys, look, I have a mouse today. Hold on.
I think they saying we can hear both.
It's not muted. So let me make sure. Let's see. This is all because I want to make sure. Oh, I got it. I get it. Hold on. Okay. Jack, try again.
Hey, what's going on?
Jack?
Yeah.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Guess I can hear you. What's going on, Katie? How are you? Good to see you.
Good. You? How's my Wi-Fi? Is it better? I'm closer to my Wi-Fi place.
It seems good. It seems.
All right. No lag so far?
Maybe the best connection we've had yet. Could be.
I mean, that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm going for. So excited. Thank you. Welcome to the Katie Halper Show. Really excited that today we have a stellar lineup. And I'm going to bring in, because you know what? There's no day like today. There's no moment like the moment. I'm going to bring in our first guest, who I've been very excited to have on, been wanting to have him on for a while. You probably know him. You probably love him. You probably watch him, hear him. And he is none other than Kyle Kalinski. And he has a new show, a new podcast with Crystal Ball. And let's just bring him in. Kyle.
Hey.
Hi, can you hear
everybody?
us?
Yeah,
Hi,
I can hear
thanks
you
so
just
much
fine.
for joining us. Great.
My pleasure. Do you hear me okay? Is my mic audio good? Okay.
Yeah,
good.
your audio is great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. So welcome to the show. This is Jack, my co-host.
Hi, what's going on, Kyle? How are you?
How's it going, man? Nice to meet you.
Good. Good. Nice to meet you too.
Thank you so much for making time for us. We know how busy you are. Oh, also, yes, please do hit the like button and share this link. So I just wanted to ask you, first of all, how did you fight over, basically, how did Crystal win? Why is it Crystal Kyle?
I guess it's alphabetical.
I didn't put up a fight. I had no problem with her name being first. In all seriousness, she's a pro interviewer. I mean, she already does it. She's been doing it for years. I'm not. I'm a guy who loves the sound of my own voice, and I could monologue all day long. That's easy. But for me to bounce ideas off of other people, it's a little more difficult for me. So I immediately caved and I said, Crystal, Kyle, and friends works just fine for me.
So you're like a Democrat. You're almost like a member of the squad.
That's right. To her, I'm just like, yeah, you win. Go ahead.
Yeah, you win,
exactly.
Fold first.
I just gave.
Sure.
Yeah. And tell us also, I mean, we're going to get into politics, of course, but I just want to know, this sounds so corny, but what is your process? How do you do what you do? How do you decide what to cover? Do you have an aha moment? Do you write up notes? Yeah.
So it's a great question, because I think a lot of people are actually interested in, like, you know, the day-to-day and the basics when it comes to what we do. For me, I've always stayed true to my original process, which is basically I will scroll through Twitter, and whatever the hell I find interesting is what I end up covering. And I feel like people start getting in trouble when they deviate from that, and when they think of, like, what is the thing I think I should cover, as opposed to just like, no, what's actually interesting to me. So the more you can stay true to the original formula, I think the better off you usually are.
So you just get inspired by something, it makes you angry, and then you decide to write a monologue about it?
Yeah, well, I don't write anything. For me, it's all off the cuff. It's all like,
You're kidding.
no, on my show, what I'll do is I'll have like cliff notes, like little bullet points as to stuff I want to say, and then I just riff off of that. I'm much better when I'm off script as opposed to on script.
Sure.
Jack, did you know that about Kyle?
I didn't know about Kyle, but you know, I similarly, you know, and it's probably a lot more clear in my podcasting than Kyle's. Can't do anything more than a bullet point, you know, list, and sometimes not even that. Sometimes not even that. I can't even do.
Wait, Jack, are you saying that when you come on my show, you are not reading from a teleprompter?
This is not tightly scripted. I'm not scrolling a prompter here.
Right.
I'm just off the cuff.
Wow. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I knew that you were like that, Kyle, in terms of like not reading it like you had a teleprompter, but I had no idea. So you just have bullet points.
Yeah, well, honestly, most of the time it's not even that. It's just me off the top of my head saying whatever it is I feel about a certain story. But yeah, the most preparation I ever do is just bullet points. But like when it comes to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends, I actually do have some questions jotted down, very abbreviated, and then I could kind of riff off that. So that's the most prep I do, basically.
Wow, that's so fascinating. This isn't like, well, this isn't something you talk about, right? Like, I'm not saying something that's like totally well known and owning myself as an ignoramus, right?
No, I don't know. I think people probably have a mixed perception of how I do my show, but yeah, I mean, people know, like, I read the articles or I watch the videos and then I comment on it, but all the prep is done like beforehand. And then when I get on air, it really is just whatever I think.
Wow. And do you go back and edit it? Are you like, oh, I don't like the way I sounded there? Do you ever do that? Or
very, very, very rarely. Like the only like edits in the videos are like when I stumble over something and I don't like it. Like sometimes I'll even keep the stumbles in, but if it's like stumbling over something and I don't like it, I don't think it works, then I'll take it out. Or if I just make a point that later I think was a bad point, I'll take it out, you know, but it's rare.
And then you can just cover it with the visual, like whatever you're showing.
Well, for those examples, I will literally take it out. Like I'll take out the 20 seconds and just, you know, throw it away. But
got it. Is there a jump cut then?
Yeah. Sometimes I do the jump cut. Sometimes it's the flash on the screen, and I go through it. But you know, 85% of secular talk videos have no cuts at all, pretty much.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say Secular Talk is the name of your show, because I just think everyone knows about it. By the way, if you want to put in your bio, like in your name, if you want to put, because you really need more exposure and more followers, Kyle. I'm not sure people know about your video, your YouTube show or your podcast, but feel free to, of course, add those in there. And how did you get interested in politics?
How did I get interested in politics? That's another good question. I came to it through a bunch of different avenues. So when I was younger, I got obsessed with Noam Chomsky. I got obsessed with Richard Dawkins and like hardcore atheisty stuff. Mm-hmm. And also the Iraq War was very big in sort of bringing me into politics, because what I was amazed by is like how you could have such wild disagreement on something that seemed so crucial. How you'd have like Fox News and Bill O'Reilly acting like it was a moral and just war. And then, we come to find out that the Bush administration licensed the war. And, I'd see Bill Maher would do rants against the war. And I was just fascinated that you could have this thing that happened and have completely opposite interpretations of reality. And of course, I'm anti-war, as everybody knows, but that really kind of brought me into politics and made me think about it 24/7.
And what kind of, how did you even like start reading Chomsky? And how do you come from a family that's progressive, that's anti-war?
No, interestingly enough, it's not from my family. I would describe my dad as mostly apolitical, but to the extent he was ever in politics, he would like listen to Rush Limbaugh during lunch on the car ride. So he was not it. My mom, growing up, she grew up in a Republican family, and so for most of her life, she was a Republican voter. But in recent years, she's become a Democratic voter. But she's certainly not the kind of lefty like I am. So it definitely didn't come from my family. It really just came from my own interests. I mean, I do remember I had some professors who kind of got me going down that road a little bit. It was a professor who introduced me to Noam Chomsky, and I started watching like little clips of Noam Chomsky, and then eventually I started reading his books. So I don't know. It's interesting. I can't even put my finger on exactly how I came to love politics, but it's obviously something I think about 24/7.
Right. Did you convert your family at all? Have you brought them along?
Yes and no. Like most of my family does not watch almost any of my stuff, which I actually kind of prefer. Like, I don't really want them knowing because you know me, I joke around, I make fart noises on air, I pretend like I jerk off on air. Like everything is just, it's not. I don't want my family watching that 24/7. But
Hi,
I've got some
Mom.
members. That's exactly what I've done, and she'd be mortified by it. She has the decorum sensibilities.
Right.
I
mean, to be fair, my mom doesn't really have decorum, like that. To be fair, that thing is, I think, would be problematic for very laid back parents too. But yes, go along.
Exactly,
the jerk off salute. Yeah.
Exactly. So my brother-in-law watches, but not many others. I forgot the original question. What was it?
Oh, if you converted your family.
Oh yeah, I converted my mom from being a liberal Republican to being like a Joe Biden Democrat, basically. And
do you regret it?
I mean, I'd rather have her vote for, the corporate Democrats than vote for the hardcore Republicans. So I guess it's a step in the right direction. But no, I didn't turn her into, a Bernie Sanders lover, which actually shows that I failed at my job in some ways, because I have this ability to convert like young people who are going down the alt-right pipeline and turn them into like hardcore lefties, but I can't change my mom into a Bernie supporter. So in some ways I view that as like a failure of myself and my own abilities of persuasion.
Yeah. You should just quit. Just get out of the game. Go to law school, become a social worker.
At bat. Focus on. I think you need to focus only on your mom from now on.
I know, bring your mom on the show.
Get rid of the YouTube show, all the Crystal Kyle. Focus solely on your mom and see if you can bring her over.
Do Instagram videos where you guys have beers.
Funny enough, I actually feel like if anybody could convince my mom, it might be Crystal Ball.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
You got a good episode idea. Go do it.
Yeah. You should just dedicate your episode to your mom, your next episode.
Or we bring her on to talk to her.
Yeah, bring her on.
Oh, yeah. But first you have to, you should do a before and after. Yeah. That would be good.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. And what are you thinking about politically right now? What's on your radar, to quote your co-host Crystal Ball from
I mean, it's the same thing everybody's thinking about right now. So it's, what happened.
I know you're talking about Kanye and Kim Kardashian. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. This is a safe space. Yeah.
I can't believe that marriage failed. I thought that thing was set in stone.
I mean, you actually did tweet about it. Now that I remember, right?
Yeah,
you were like,
did.
if they can't make it, who
if they can't make it, we're all screwed, because we're supposed to be perfect.
You two are joking, but obviously the news on everybody's mind is how Kamala Harris had the wrong outfit on the cover of Vogue. There are just days where you look at the news and you're like, I can't believe my eyes, and that's what I felt like today when I saw the news breaking about the cover of Vogue and Kamala Harris.
What was her problem? What was wrong with it?
They used the wrong picture.
Yeah, they told her they were
literally.
They told her they were going to use the picture of her in like a baby blue outfit, and they used one with her in a different color. And apparently her people were flipping out behind the scenes, which goes to show you Kamala Harris is exactly who we thought she was, because instead of thinking about what's happening in the country right now and like an attempted insurrection, she's like, oh my God, my outfit is the wrong color.
Kamala Harris is like a sitting senator who potentially could be like overseeing the impeachment if that kind of thing happens. And 1 week before, they would have been talking about the outfit in Vogue.
That's exactly right.
Am I supposed to? I would love to try to. I went to Wesleyan, so I feel like I can wokeify anything and turn everything into a feminist, subversive move, much like neoliberal feminists have done with Nancy's clapping. So I'm just going to say that Kamala, well, first of all, because what color is it? It's not baby blue. Can someone tell me the actual color?
Well, the thing is also, it was like a baby blue pantsuit versus they switched it to a blazer with jeans and like Converse. So it was like a more down to earth look versus a more Hillary-fied look.
Got it. Okay, so here's
they wanted the Hillary-fied look, and they got the Converse.
Okay, so here's the thing. That is they are depriving her of her agency. She has the power to make sartorial decisions. And they are undermining her seriousness. And honestly, we know that she's making a policy shift, because she used to really celebrate the Tims. And now she's deciding. And so basically Vogue is saying to her,
we're going back to Tims.
We don't see you. They don't see her. Right? They don't see her. They're invisibilizing her, and they're depriving her of agency. And I think that we can honestly, we can walk in Tim's and chew gum at the same time, if you will. And clearly what we should be talking about is not just impeachment, not just the surveillance state, but also baby blue Converse. Yeah. So we're on to you. You're on notice, Vogue.
Okay.
Nice try. But besides those really important stories, what are you thinking about?
So, for my show for tomorrow, what I have lined up, of course, I'm going to be talking about the attempted insurrection, or I call it the diet coup of the government. I'm going to be talking about the Twitter and basically every, social media outlet giving Trump the death penalty effectively. So that I got that coming up, and, the normal, a bunch of other stuff. I'll be running my mouth for about 2.5 hours as per usual.
And what are your thoughts on all of this?
Oh, geez, which one you want me to start with? You want me to start with the attempted coup?
Yeah.
So the reason I call it a diet coup is because, in my mind, a coup has to involve some people in the military at the highest levels of the government who actually make it so that, as Bhaskar Sankara said, you can grab the levers of power and keep it. You know what I mean? So, in other words, it had to have like some chance of success in order for it to be that. And this was just like somebody on Twitter called them flabby suburbanites. Somebody else, the guys look like they're from Duck Dynasty, and some guy was with his shirt off.
Comic Con. It looked like Comic Con to me.
And I'm not trying to downplay the damage that they caused, because they caused a lot of damage, and over 50 people are injured, and there's, I think, 5 or 6 are dead. So this is nothing to like downplay or scoff at. Sure. And my only point is, there was no way in hell that this was going to work, not even close. And so I guess the next logical question is, well, what should happen next? Because the conversation is, some people were saying 25th Amendment, take Trump out by the 25th Amendment, because he was basically egging this on. Other people were saying, well, let's do impeachment. That's the big debate that's happening now.
Right.
But interestingly, I saw something earlier today in The Nation that really caught my eye, because I think it makes the most sense. I think the way to handle this is for Congress to invoke the 14th Amendment, Section 3 and Section 5, which basically says, if you have a politician or somebody in the government who's effectively egging on an insurrection or a rebellion, that you basically can ban them from ever holding public office again. And in order to do that, you don't need the exorbitant numbers that you need if you're doing impeachment. You only need a simple majority. So I think that that's what the House should do, and I think that that's what the Senate should do. And then we wouldn't have to worry about Trump 2024. And we wouldn't have to worry about Trump deciding, whatever, wants to be a senator or something like that. And listen, I do think that there should be consequences, because even though he was talking out of both sides of his mouth, so he was giving himself enough cover to say, no, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I wasn't really egging it on. We all know the spirit of what he was saying was egging it on. Right. So he is guilty of that. And should there be some consequences for it? Absolutely. I think we have to do something.
I'm like, what the hell do you remove a president for, if not this? Like, why do we have it? If not for this, if not for my other thing about it is that, you have to punish Trump because we're being very punitive with all the people that, ended up walking around the Capitol. And I agree with you that, this was a very serious thing, and there were some very serious actors in there. There were people with zip ties and shit like that, and all weapons and everything. But there were also a lot of people that just walked with a crowd into the Capitol because the police let them in there. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
and I think a little of what I'm seeing this week, and I'm like, I really do think we should punish these people with like the laws that we already have. I think
Yes.
this like
Yes.
this big push to call them domestic terrorists and to call them anarchists, like I've seen on the news, is really what's scary to me. You know, I'm
Yeah, I
like,
agree.
I don't think it's worth painting them all with the same domestic terrorist brush or even using the term domestic terrorist at all. And, you know, I think I'm like, let's differentiate between the people who were just like grandmas wandering around like it was
Yes.
Comic-Con, and then the actual real deal serious actors there, like there were pipe bombs placed. That is a separate thing than
Separate
like
category, yeah.
then like literally I saw an interview with a guy who it appeared didn't have like had mental problems. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, these are like sort of separate categories. And what I'm a little most worried about is this like rush to just like call them all domestic terrorists and give Joe Biden this edict to make a new, you know, Patriot Act.
Exactly
Right. Yeah.
correct. No,
I
no
agree, yeah.
Patriot Act 2.0. No
Yeah,
Patriot Act
seriously, no
2.0.
Patriot Act 2.0. And
We
it's
have the
like,
laws that we have them all.
we have
They're
them,
in
and
laws
actually,
already. Yeah.
Evan Greer, who's joining us later, basically has this exact critique, which is that we don't need to change surveillance laws. That was not the issue. People knew this was going to happen, and this is going to be something that I think. And I think that a lot of the left, when it comes to issues both of surveillance and of big tech, I think there is I understand where it comes from. I think there is a problematic. I just want to everyone drink when I say problematic. Seriously, even if it's coconut water, but there's a problematic tendency to and I understand where it comes from, but to me, the kind of rush to expand either the surveillance state or the rush to expand big tech's power or the police state, I understand where it comes from. I think it's misguided. And I also think it's like, I have a problem with it on the level of principle, but even if I didn't have a problem on it on the principle level, it's a problem on the strategic level. Because as we all know, the people who this will bite most in the ass is the left.
Sure.
Yes, and I feel like no lefties who are in positions of power understand exactly what you just explained, and you're 100% correct.
Yeah, and there's an interesting counter argument. I mean, when I say interesting, I'm being charitable, but a lot of people are like, well, who cares? Because they already go after the left. They already censor the left. They already surveil us. So why not just apply it to the other side? And it's like, well, things can get worse.
Yes.
Like things get worse.
And also, admitting you're a hypocrite isn't really a great argument either. Like, yeah, I'm a hypocrite, and so what? Like, well, that alone is not good.
Right.
My other argument specifically about the domestic terrorism label is that, like, the term terrorism is a vague one at this point. Like, yes, it has been used for people like the Oklahoma City bomber and, in the past for domestic terrorists, but kind of since 2000, it's become this very vague catch-all term for any non-state affiliated, like, hostile actor.
Right.
And we've used it to do like torture to people and stuff like that. Like,
right,
I would say, let's try to not use the term terrorist and be more specific just in general, rather than try to like wokely expand like the use of terrorist because to make it even or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like I see so many people being like, like if they were,
exactly.
black, they'd be terrorists. I'm like, let's try not to call anybody
Right. The
terrorist.
response to that isn't let's make more people terrorists who aren't black. The response is let's not make black people terrorists.
Let's stop talking about
Stop it's the same thing with the affluenza thing, right?
I do come at it from a slightly different perspective. Like, I understand your point. I think you're 100% correct. I think the downsides of rushing to call it terrorism are actually colossal, and it could lead something to like a Patriot Act 2.0. So point definitely taken. My view on it is more like, I'm fine with using the term terrorist or domestic terrorist, but what I would implore people to do is at the very least give the conversation the nuance that's deserved. So in other words, whenever we talk about something that happens with Black Lives Matter, a rally or something like that, and then elements of it become violent, like the right would love to call that domestic terrorism and arrest everybody and throw the book at them.
Right.
Whereas our response is always, well, hold on now. 97% of the people at this rally were totally peaceful. They're peaceful protesters. So let's acknowledge that. And then, yes, you can go after the 3% if they actually break laws or whatever. By the same token, the exact same thing should apply here. Yes, even though I do not like these people, I don't politically agree with these people. There are people, like you were describing before, Jack, who just we're not partaking in the violent elements of this, and we got to be
Right.
honest about that and
Yeah.
upfront about that.
Right.
But go after the ones who did do it,
I
because
agree, yes.
obviously there were very serious crimes that were committed.
For sure.
Yeah, and there's actually footage of people who, again, these are not people I agree with and would like agree with on, you know, in the voting booth or anything, but like there are people who were, well, two things I would say. One is like two things I've seen that are surprising to me. One is that there were a lot more non-white people at the storming of the Capitol than I would have expected, which we can like talk about later. It's you know, I should probably do an entire show on that, but I'll just mention it casually. But the other issue is that, you know, I agree with what you're saying 100%. And there were people there who were like, calm down, like trying to pacify the crowds. And I also think that what we should remember is that like Timothy McVeigh, like what did Bill Clinton do with that? He passed the effective, what was it, Anti-Terrorist Death Penalty Act, which just expanded the use of the death penalty.
Right.
And who does that apply to mostly? Black people. Like
Right.
it's not, you know, it's something we really need to be cautious about and look at.
Well,
One of
the social media censorship, exact
Yeah.
same issue we have here, which is like, you know, people could cheer when it's their political opponents that's happening to, but then you did just agree to the principle, and now immediately, I mean, the Red Scare podcast was banned, you know?
Yeah.
I remember when we had this conversation, the Chapo Trap House Reddit was banned.
Right.
And I was like, of course this was going to happen because everybody was just cheering for censorship like 5 minutes ago.
But you know what's frustrating is that a lot of the people who are cheering for that would say that those people are fascists or fascist enablers. Like, I look.
Oh, about like Chapo and them, they would say it about?
Yes. Now listen to
Oh,
how
wow.
principled I am. Red Scare called me congenitally boring. But I don't, you know, what is it? I may not agree with what you have to say about me being congenitally boring, but I will fight to the death to defend your right to tweet. So there you go. You're welcome, Red Scare. But yeah, they went after a bunch of women who were at a party, a socialist party, a DSA party or a Jacobin party. And then as Sarah Leonard said it, like, we were all upset. They were upset that they were not in an article that we were all upset we were in. Anyway, enough pouring the tea. I'm sure Red Scare will come on either my show or Useful Idiots at some point. So again, that's my Voltaire line on them. But no, but I mean, I always bring up the example of Palestinians and Palestinian critics of Israel. And it's like, I don't care more. It's not like I care more about Q than I mean, I don't agree with them. I think they are dangerous and scary. It just, we have to look at how we are going to respond to this stuff as opposed to,
we don't even have to go that far. Rania Khalek, Abby Martin, Max Blumenthal, Ben Norton. These are all people that at one point or another have experienced censorship.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
And they're
right. And
usually just correct about stuff. Like they say things that are true and then they get consequences for it.
Totally, yeah. In fact, today, I was inviting Jason Stanley to potentially have a debate with Daniel Bessner about fascism and coups. And some rando, but I just think it's so telling, was just like, I'd be careful because Katie and Matt Taibbi had on Max Blumenthal. And I was like, how dare you? I had him on recently, much more recently on my show. So why are you invisibilizing me? Anyway, but yeah, I agree. And it's a fraught subject. And again, I think that, like, you know, the whole thing about like the affluenza debate, right? Like, we should be pointing out that Black Lives Matter people would have been shot and killed. Yes. We should be pointing out that in terms of just in general, like the criminal justice system, Black people are locked up for things disproportionately, right? And the move and the push should be, and I think we talked about this last time, Jack, a bit, but the push should be, let's highlight this and fight for that, fight against that, not fight for more white people and more
fight for fair treatment for everybody, not to crack down harder on the right-wing white people.
What I'd say also is that, you know, everybody was so astonished by what happened at the Capitol and the way the police acted at the Capitol, but I would actually make the argument that this kind of de-escalation is actually what you would want to see the police do more generally. Now, with that said, it was only done here because they're white nationalist sympathizers and they have an ideological alignment with the people that they were policing here. But this is actually the type of policing, you know, like where you back off. It's like ultimately these people kind of went around a building. Like the person who was hurt because they were trying to break in to where Mike Pence was and was shot in the neck by Secret Service. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the type of policing you'd actually rather see, is like de-escalation tactics and trying to, like, rather than just like shooting people with tear gas and everything like that.
Yeah, but
Like,
the only problem was some seemed to be actually in on it. Like, there were obviously some
that's what
police
I'm
who were
saying, is
total
that, like,
victims who were like literally killed, you know, but there were others who, like the one where they just opened gates for them and kind of waved them in.
Yeah,
that was above and beyond. That wasn't just de-escalation. That was like, I'm actively going to be on your side and fuck shit up.
And frankly, that's also what we should look at this, you know, as what is alarming about this is that a hard right mob formed in the Capitol and had assistance and aid from the local police. Like, that is something that, like, has happened and will keep happening around the country, and that's what's alarming about what happened on Wednesday. I guess what happened on Wednesday, not that a bunch of people occupied a state building. Like, I know that was kind of the most arresting thing that we saw on television, but actually the core of what was scary about Wednesday is a hard right fascist mob forming with police assistance.
Right.
Yeah. There's a debate, an active debate that's, you know, alive and well every time there's any sort of riot that breaks out. It's like, what exactly are the tactics that we should all be in favor of? You know what I mean? Because obviously the cause matters. And so the tactics, in some instances, people might view more synthetically certain tactics if the cause is more just. So I take your point. And those are all conversations that we've been, you know, having on the left for a really long time. And there's a lot of disagreement. Are you old school Malcolm X style, or are you more MLK style? And I think we'll have those debates, you know, until the end of time, pretty much.
Right. And I guess I would distinguish between I mean, you guys already have, but there's de-escalating and then there's enabling. But to me, it was kind of the worst combination of, like, not stopping people in a way that they could have. They should have had more people there stopping them. So it was like enabling them, letting them in, and then shooting one, killing one. So, like, which is not a good way to do it. And they could have,
The other thing is they keep saying this is a mob that you know, went on the Capitol and it escalated to death. And I'm like, well, what deaths? Like, the death was like a woman got shot in the neck, like a police officer was beat and then died later. Someone else tased himself in the nuts and leg, like, while he was stealing a painting, and died of that. And another cop, like, died of suicide today. I'm like, you know,
one of them was beat to death, right?
One of them was beat and then died later. So they were beat. They weren't beat to death at the scene. They were beat and then died. Yeah, of those injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, guilty. I think we can still. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
You're like, they did not want him to die. It was a
no.
A roughing
I'm
up.
saying that is the deadly. But, you know, even on Wednesday when the you know, the Congress people were talking about, like, this deadly attack on the Capitol, I'm like, well, this is like one woman got shot in the neck by Secret Service, you know.
Oh, so is your point that it's not? I think I'm not getting your point. Your point is that, like,
my point is that the mob itself, like, you know, when they were talking about it on Wednesday, they were like, this mob took the White House, and in sort of this, you know, we're trying to make this new 9/11. Like, we're trying to escalate and make this into the most severe sounding thing it was. And when they were talking about that on Wednesday, and they said that this, you know, went to this deadly riot on the Capitol or whatever, the death happened from the Secret Service side to the people's side. You know what I mean?
One of them did, and then the others were not, right? I mean, I don't think you're making light of. I think maybe your point is that, like, I don't know. I mean, there was one person killed on the Trump side, right? Trump supporter side, and then one person killed.
No police had died by the time that they were talking about it on Wednesday night in the House.
Okay, so your point is not. I guess
they were saying, like, this mob, this, like, deadly mob that came to the Capitol. At that point, the only people that had died was someone that Secret Service shot, and then someone who tased himself to death. You know what I mean? So, when they were talking about this in the House that night, saying, like, this deadly mob that came through here, you know, at that point, the only deaths that had happened were because of, like, the Secret Service and accidental.
That's interesting, right?
You know, but yes, they did beat someone who then did.
Yeah, and they also, some of them were armed and, like, inside the Capitol, and that, like, that picture where they're all holding the gun, trying to keep them at bay. That's going to go down in the history books, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I mean, I think maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, I get, is your point that like we shouldn't, that there was a rush to, I mean, it was deadly, but is your point it could have been a lot
his
worse?
point
and that
is
people
they're
are-
being as hyperbolic as possible
is
because
that,
they
like,
want
the-
Patriot Act 2.0.
Right,
That's
right.
the
My point is
right.
that like there are like, you know, the vast majority of the people that were like wandering around the Capitol were like people that like rushed in with a crowd and got pushed in like Comic-Con people. You know what I mean? Like I do think that there were real deal serious actors with them, but I think that like this immediate
zip tie
rush,
guy.
zip tie guy, like that guy is scary. Like zip tie guy is scary to me.
But he was found with Molotov cocktails too, if I
Someone was
remember
found
correctly.
with Molotov cocktails, and there were pipe bombs found at the RNC.
And apparently, they were waiting for Trump's further orders. That's
Right.
one thing I read too, which is
also
kind
the
of crazy.
funniest, you know, it's like
Because then he comes out and he speaks out of both sides of his mouth, and he like condemns them while also telling them they're very special people and they mean well.
Yeah,
and, you
right.
know,
What do you think of the response?
the response from Trump.
Of Trump, yeah.
Well, this gets into the broader conversation about impeachment versus why I think the way they should go is the 14th Amendment as opposed to impeachment, because it's classic Trump. Trump is a classic, as Crystal Ball said on the last episode of Crystal Kyle and Friends, he's a classic abuser where like he goes right to that line and then reels it in, and then goes right to that line and then reels it in.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened here. So he went out there and he said, like, we love our law enforcement. We're going to keep our law enforcement safe. We're going to respect our law enforcement.
Right.
And also this election was totally fraudulent and totally stolen. And I understand why you guys are out there doing what you're doing, but definitely be good to our law enforcement.
Right,
but also I
right.
totally get why you're out there. So he says both things at the same time to give himself enough cover so that he could weasel out of actual accountability, so that when it does, if they were to try to impeach, they wouldn't get enough Republicans, and you know it would just all go up in smoke and there'd be no consequences. So it's classic Trump, and this is what he's done on every issue forever, and he'll keep doing it.
Right. I just want to read some comments from Brad, if that's okay. Brad, can I read your comments to me? All right, I'm going to assume that's it. Yes. Oh, he wrote, sure. Yeah. So Brad wrote, I disagree with the de-escalation being good. Reason being, imagine if an actual competent terrorist embedded in that mob, imagine if ISIS or whatever had people in there. They could have taken out Congress, actually taken hostages, stolen, destroyed tons of material, etc. We were unbelievably lucky that didn't happen. It was a prime opportunity. In my opinion, we can both acknowledge the seriousness of this while also opposing any attempt to use it to push a new Patriot Act.
I literally, Bradley, I think you're a great guy and everything, and I think you're great. I disagree with you. And
Wait, hold on. He's not done. Hold on. Reason being, the problem wasn't a lack of resources, etc. The problem was the choice to allow it to happen. That's the problem.
I mean, that's fine. You can disagree with that de-escalation in this manner is good or whatever. I would say, though, that even, you know, going to like, what if ISIS was in that crowd is a very like, you know, sort of fearful, paranoid, like national security mindset to find yourself in.
They shouldn't have been able to get in the building, and that's the bottom line to me.
Yeah,
like that's
that's
the main point. Like, you know that picture where they said when there was BLM was maybe going to be in there, and then there was a line of the National Guard all decked out in full gear, standing on the steps, just not letting them go any further. In a world that made sense, yeah, you just have a lineup of officers or National Guard or whatever right on the steps, and then that's it. That's the end of it. Nobody's getting by the National Guard. If you had the sufficient numbers, if you had the will to just stop them right there, it would have been fine. But as we alluded to before, you have some members of the police are more sympathetic to these causes, so that's why all mayhem was able to break loose.
And so I'm, by the way, not also trying to downplay what happened at the Capitol. I just think that, like, from that very day that it happened, we have been, like, very fired up about what these people did at the Capitol. And we're going to be, like, hyper punitive with them.
Yep, I agree. And that's not good.
And ultimately, I think that this is all because we're not going to be able to punish Trump. I think that everybody is like focusing their anger on these people who walked around the Capitol rather than the person who incited them to do this. Like, this is a very weird situation where they did do an insurrection, but they were told to by the president of the United States. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to downplay what all these people did. I just think that we're going to be overly punitive on them because no one will ever be able to punish Trump.
Well,
and
there's also
really is his fault.
There's also another angle to this, though, too, which is that, you know, like the squad was just kind of embarrassed with the whole forced vote thing where they did nothing. And so now they want to flex their lefty credentials and act like, no, we're great. We're the toughest and we're the best that you got here in the House. And so they're finding an issue where they could really go all in and be super aggressive. But that issue happens to be, this. And so, yeah, you're getting some of the loudest, most aggressive commentary on this is from people who are usually our ideological allies or the closest to it in Congress. And so basically, and Bhaskar Sankara made this point the other day, he was saying, now when you look at the squad versus like Pelosi and Democratic leadership, what's the difference on this issue? And the difference is it's just like the squad is louder and more aggressive while agreeing with the same points that like Pelosi is making. So it sucks because obviously when you go all in on these issues, you want it to be something other than that could maybe lead to Patriot Act 2.0. You want them to out-left everybody on issues where it's like, no, there's a real substantive material policy and change that could help the American people, as opposed to just being more punitive and being more tough on crime.
Right. Yeah. I think that's like the real challenge, and that we can do both of those things at the same time. What do you think of, a lot of people are saying like, oh, we're going to get the impeachment instead of Medicare for all. This is, we're going to get a hearing on that instead of Medicare for all, or people are dying and starving and out of work. Domestic violence is up, all these things. Like, where should we be prioritizing? What do you think should be?
Well, for me, I think the number one priority right now should just be those $2,000 checks. Immediately past those $2,000 checks. And Joe Manchin was just defecting, but if the Dems can get Hawley, which they probably can, then we could still pass it through budget reconciliation. So I would just do everything I can on that issue, because honestly, that's why Georgia went the way it went. One of the biggest reasons why Georgia went the way it went is because the Democrats were out there aggressively saying, we're going to get you $2,000 checks. So if the Democrats go back on that, that's I shudder at the thought of it.
Right. And what are your thoughts about Georgia and how that happened and what the takeaways from that are?
Yeah, no, I think takeaway is that, if you give people an option to materially improve their lives and you're very straightforward about it, they're going to vote for you and they're going to help you. I mean, there's other aspects too, which is that the Trump fever broke, like all of his magic sort of gone. He's been in there a little too long. People are a little worn down and tired. And like the Republican Party post the election loss to Biden, the whole thing has just been Trump whining and bitching and moaning about how it's a fraudulent election, even though he was slapped down in court 1,000 times. So like that started defining the Republican Party as like just this insane maniac leader. And so that hurt Loeffler and Perdue. But then when the $2,000 check issue came back around, and that you can thank Bernie, you can thank Hawley, and you can thank Trump for just dropping that bomb at the last minute to throw that in the conversation. What happened was the Democrats picked that up and ran with it, and they were Warnock was aggressively arguing for it. Even Ossoff was aggressively arguing for it. And then Biden went to Georgia and gave a speech and said, vote for us, we're giving you the $2,000 checks. So really, I think that analysis is the only analysis that makes sense, which is the Democrats promised something very tangible to help improve people's lives in the middle of a pandemic and a depression, and that's why they won.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. What's that woman's name? Spanks? What's her name? The one who was like, we lost because of the socialists. Heidi Spanks.
I don't know.
Who was that?
that
Spikes?
terrible no-name person who like literally nobody knew and who was like all talking about, she was the one who spoke to, I don't know, the hot take about that. And what do you think needs to happen moving forward? Like, what are you pushing for, organizing for, rallying the troops around? Spangberger.
Spangberger. Yeah, that sounds very weird. That name is very awkward. So the thing that I think should be done next is that I think that the squad should get together, the Justice Democrats should get together, have a block of like a dozen Congress people. And I think they should come out and say, we're going to block every single bill unless and until Joe Biden signs 5 executive orders that we want. And those 5 executive orders could be legalizing marijuana, or at the very least decriminalizing marijuana. It could be eliminating a certain amount of student loan debt, all things that he could do through executive order. And you give him an ultimatum. You say, listen, if you sign these executive orders, we're ready to do, business. If you don't want to sign these executive orders, we'll just block every bill and we don't care about the consequences. So that's what they should do. But will they do it? Probably not, because, they need to be incredibly disciplined and they need to be willing to have the media hate on them and leadership hate on them. And I don't think they want the media hating them, and I don't think they want leadership, coming after them. So I don't think they'll do it, but that would be an example of the Justice Democrats acting in the exact same way that the Tea Party acted when they had power and when they were a strong voting bloc. And it would bring material change. I guarantee you Joe Biden would sign at least one or two of those executive orders if you played hardball with him. But you have to be willing to do it. Unfortunately, I don't see them do that yet.
Yeah, I mean, also, can you explain your relationship to the Justice Democrats?
Yeah, so I was one of the co-founders. It was myself, Cenk Uygur, Shoykat Chakrabarti, and Zach Exley. And yeah, I mean, the idea of it was basically like, let's do a Tea Party of the left. And, we were very fortunate, very lucky to get a number of Justice Democrats elected. And we're still very proud of them. They're still clearly our ideological allies on 98% of the issues. But unfortunately, in my opinion, I don't think they're necessarily holding true to the original mission, which is a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. I think they are. Once you get in Washington, D.C., you get Washington, D.C. brain, which makes you think if I go along to get along, I can get better results. And I think a lot of them are kind of, unfortunately, have gone down that path because they're corrupt, not because they're sellouts, not because of anything nefarious, but because they genuinely believe if I go along with leadership, then maybe I'll get crumbs that'll end up helping down the road. And I just think it's the wrong approach.
Yeah, I think it's systemic. I mean, more than I personally think that's the better thing to focus on, and you can apply pressure. But I actually think I think it can backfire when you over personalize it, because then I think you alienate people who would otherwise support press.
100%. 100%.
And it kind of plays into, you're almost giving them cover to not do the right thing.
That's exactly right. And they get defensive. Yeah,
they get defensive, and other people get protective of them.
That's right.
So, and then let's see some questions. Let's see. Jay Bezel says, would this co-sponsorship for the impeachment in 200s and then vote for it, could the Dems have any excuse not to force vote on M4A with the same energy?
I don't think they have any excuse not to do it now, but they didn't do it.
Yeah.
I thought all the arguments against it were nonsense.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Observer. I do think, though, it's a much easier. This makes it the optics of it very precarious. For better or for worse, I think that what happened now makes it very easy for people to kind of shame people for saying force the vote.
Sure. Yeah.
Because of what? Yeah. So it really. I mean, besides this being very bad in many levels, I do think it also does hamstring that a bit. Let's see. Observer writes, all the posers and losers yelling fraud squad act like they are some kind of morally superior beings who wouldn't be subject to exactly the same systemic institutional pressures if they ever got elected to office.
Yeah, I don't like the hashtag fraud squad thing. Here's my problem with that. Again, it goes directly to the level of you're my enemy and your intentions are bad. I'm a big believer in, I know who my enemies are. My enemies are, yes, the corporate Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, Democratic leadership. They're my enemy. I'm more than happy to say that.
Yeah.
The Justice Democrats are not my enemy. They're my bad ally. They're my ally who needs to
They're
go
just fucking
fine.
up. They're just fucking up. They're not
That's exactly right.
villains forever.
Yeah, I agree.
That's exactly right.
I agree. Yeah.
And so that's why the fraud squad thing I did not agree with, because the second you go to the level of I'm going to attack these people's intentions, you lose me because you're just wrong. So here's how you know there's a difference between Pelosi and any member of the Justice Democrats. When the day comes where there is a vote on Medicare for all, every single Justice Democrat will vote for it. Nancy Pelosi will vote against it. If you're willing to overlook that nuance and that distinction, you're just an idiot. You're just dumb.
I mean, also, as disappointed as I can sometimes be with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she is also a sitting congressperson who's not taking corporate donors, corporate money, and that alone is so huge and such a seismic difference. You know what I mean?
It's a seismic difference, and
as much as people want to not acknowledge that and just hate because it's you want to be loud online, but people
we're trying to own her on that exact point. People were trying to own her, and they posted her, where her donors were from, and a lot of the money came from Amazon. Come to find out, every single penny of that was from
Yeah, right.
Amazon workers.
Yeah, they do that with Bernie too, right? Yeah, they
Right.
do that with
Yes,
Bernie.
that's the same dirty trick they used on
Yeah.
Bernie. But the sad thing is, I think there were some people who were earnestly thinking that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was taking like big Amazon money from Jeff Bezos or something, which is absurd.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Another question. I read that. All the posts. Oh wait, we read that. What if Dems focus full year on Al-Qaeda? What's that?
Al-Qaeda, which is supposed to be like far right wing version of Al-Qaeda. So like the people who stormed the Capitol.
I see.
It's play on words like Al-Qaeda.
Right, I get it. Yeah. I'm sure they love that. That's actually good. Yeah.
It's clever.
Yeah, it's clever. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I think that I would love for you to come back. I know you've been very generous with your time. Yeah, and I agree. I think that, look, everyone has different lanes to play. I keep saying that. That's true. But I do think that there's a very important position to be staked out that says these people are being bad allies or ineffective allies, and we need to push them, and they are pushable. And that really is it. Like, they are pushable. Some people are pushable and some people aren't.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, N. Willis, I skipped your comment. What is your comment?
Different strategies for enemies than for friends. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Like, I actually 100% think it is worth running on every centrist. Like, you want people to die, because I think ideologically, like, their ideology is that they want people to die. But I just think that you do different strats.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Friends than enemies.
So Chris Kelly sadly is unsubscribing, but I thank him for his final donation. How is pressuring the squad relevant? We're on the eve of civil war. Unsubscribing. I mean, to me, it's actually very obvious how that's related to those things, right? Kyle, you just pointed out that giving people 2,000. Yeah, go on.
We could talk about both things.
Yeah.
What a weird, snarky, dumb comment. Like, thanks for the $5, dude, but we're allowed to talk about whatever the fuck we want to talk about. And if you don't like it, you could tune out. Okay. But yeah, we could have the conversation about force the vote in the squad, and we could have the conversation about the insurrection and the attempted coup. And we're going to do both those things.
Yeah.
See, now, Katie, now you're seeing why I don't like reading my Twitter mentions, is because I'll see some comment like this and I'll fucking lose it. And I want to,
Me too.
I want to physically hurt somebody when I read something like this. I'm unsubscribing. Okay, bitch, unsubscribe. Unsubscribe.
Yeah, I told Jack is not allowed to read these things. Yeah.
I had to promise earlier today that I wouldn't read the chat for this.
Because he was too triggered.
Anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you want to unsubscribe? Unsubscribe. Why do you have to do a melodramatic show about it? I'm unsubscribing.
I know. It's kind of like when people are like, block. I'm blocking you. You're blocked.
Nobody, guys, don't read your Twitter mentions, because your mental health will be a lot better.
Yeah, it's true.
And on that note, I do have to run, Katie.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Kyle, for coming on. And I'll just say that I want to wrap it up, and not just we can talk about whatever we want, but those things are related. You don't have to look, forget I know people love to mock the economic anxiety thing, and there's nuance, and it's not all solvable by economic stuff, but those things are related. They are, because if you heard what people said, a lot of them want like government relief, and they want things, and they're like, what are these people doing? And again, I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. I'm not saying it'll be cured through economic means, but to pretend that there isn't some interrelation, like interconnectedness between those two things is, I would say, naive. So anyway.
Agreed.
Thank you, Kyle, so much.
My pleasure, guys. It was fun talking to you.
You
nice
too.
To talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, guys, this is so exciting. We have our next guest coming on, and I will, this jurist, this professor is very busy, so I'll get to some of the super chats after that. But I want to bring into the chat Zephyr Teachout. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Is my sound okay? Is it coming through?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Okay. Yeah, it's great.
Great.
So I just wanted to basically, I know you've limited time because you do a lot of things in the world. What are your thoughts on what happened, and also what has to happen in terms of impeachment and in terms of big tech, and mostly those two things?
Yeah. Well, I want to. I think impeachment is absolutely essential, but I really want to focus our time on big tech, because although there's been a little attention on this, and maybe you talked about this earlier in the program,
not so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely urgent that we take this moment, and it's been urgent for some time, but I think what's happened this past week should make it clear to a lot of people to transform the business model of the big social media companies, Facebook, YouTube, in particular. And you may remember seeing headlines about this a few years ago, the horrific genocide in Myanmar, and Facebook's role, and the way in which officials used Facebook's algorithm, which does not passively allow posts or let you see posts in the order in which they are shared, but chooses what will be served up to you, in which officials in Myanmar used Facebook's algorithms, which prioritize high conflict content, conspiracy theories in this country, white nationalism, ethnic violence, to incite and build support for horrific genocide there. And I think that felt very far away to a lot of people here. It obviously was not very far away for the people there. But what we know is that we are allowing the center of our communications infrastructure to be governed by a business model which is designed to destroy democracy and the ability to come together and govern ourselves. And I think a lot of people look at this as a kind of fact of nature. They think, well, that is what tech is. It's a sort of an organic understanding as opposed to a mechanical understanding. This is absolutely a policy choice. We have this amazing business model that we use for telephones, for instance, which is that you pay for the service of being able to use telephones. And you can have Congress using a long history of the public utility regulation is one way to talk about it, or common carriage, to say, hey, if you are essential communications infrastructure, you can't have this business model because this business model is destroying us. And we'll get into conversation, but just one point that relates to this is that we know from Facebook itself, and Google uses the same business model, that 2/3 of people who joined extremist groups did so after Facebook recommended they do so. And so maybe if you're watching here, you say, well, extremist groups haven't been recommended to me, but you've got to believe the data. This is basically the business model says, let's go find the things that make the heart rate go up. They're the most conflict prone. And if that's true, and we know it's true, what that means is that what happened this week in DC, what is happening with the deep disbelief, along with the white nationalism, the deep illegitimacy, the sort of push for illegitimacy around peaceful transfer of power, all of that, it's not like Facebook allowed some of it to passively happen. It was promoting that on its platform. And so I really think one of the key things that we have to be pushing for here is for Biden's administration to take the considerable power. And the executive branch has actually really outsized power when it comes to antitrust policy, and push within Congress to transform how we allow big tech to trot all over us and to be part of destroying democracy.
So I think this is a really good point, Zephyr, and I'm really glad you're here, because I've seen so many people sort of using this to make the sort of free speech argument that, I've even seen leftists sort of making this argument, sort of following Trump being banned across all these platforms, this kind of a free speech argument. And, I guess what I would say about that is that has been like a false argument from the very beginning. This was an argument made by these tech companies to allow them to monetize. And, this is really what it is about, is like making money from extreme types of content. And so I think it's really good. And I think, it is really good to refocus this conversation on what the actual issue is here, which is all these companies creating a monopoly on communication as a profit engine. You know what I mean? Like, Trump being banned off of these websites is not a problem to me. That to me is just like these websites starting to, reckon with the reality of this, which is, that that like they have profited off of like this form of speech for a very long time. And I agree with you that we need to focus our energy on taking down these companies rather than, you know, arguing for the president's rights to be on them or something.
Well, I think, again, we tend to naturalize it and treat it like this isn't something we can have the kind of communications infrastructure we want. Designing and supporting a decentralized communications infrastructure has been central to allowing for the possibility of a democracy. And so there's sort of two different models that people use. One is the platform, and the other is to say they're just like any other journalistic publication, but they're trying to have the best of both worlds. And they don't really mind if we see them as the leaders and we're spending all our time begging them. So I have very little patience with Zuckerberg, very little patience with YouTube, but I don't think our energy should be focused on begging them to act, but really understand that it is Congress's job to make sure that they do not have the power that they do. Because whatever Zuckerberg does, he's not going to give up this quasi-king-like power that he has right now on his own. That is Congress's job. And the political will is there. And this is one of these areas where there's sort of very weird, or maybe not weird, very powerful cross-partisan alliances. So yeah, you see a lot of Republicans who are not Republicans in office who are not supporting this. Make them vote on it. This is like definitely something to push the vote. And I guess just one other point. I mean, my focus this week has to be on just like understanding that when you're thinking who is responsible here. Imagine if you had 10 years. Imagine from 2010, beginning of the Tea Party, 2009, beginning of the Tea Party to now, if the core social media companies, YouTube and Facebook, had a different business model. My belief is that we would not have seen what we saw this week at the Capitol. We would not see the numbers of people who don't believe in the election. You have a totally different incentive instead of Facebook and YouTube having the incentive to push conspiracy theories to the top. So like thinking about what that has meant and going to the deep, deep disease at the heart of our communications infrastructure is so essential because no number of Band-Aids are going to solve it. But I got to also say, it's also important as a form of stimulus. Because the other thing that Facebook and Google do is they just suck money out of the economy. Journalists know this, obviously, but content producers, small businesses who cannot be heard without advertising on Facebook and Google. What we know from the recent lawsuits, but it's a no-brainer, is Facebook and Google are jacking up their prices. So if your community restaurants that are dying right now without federal support are also having to shovel over money to these monopolies that are standing in this choke point role. So it's essential democratic policy and it's good economic policy at the same time.
It seems like there's a parallel between the way that people talk about like capitalism as this free market thing where there's no intervention. And that's just the way it is. It's the rule of nature, as you were saying. They naturalize it, right? And the stuff with Facebook and other tech companies where it's like, it's not that they're just not intervening, like you said, right? They are intervening, but there's this like funny, like, Adam Smith delusion in both capitalism and in tech stuff. So could you just talk about like what this would look like if they how politicians could stop them from intervening and what it would look like?
Yeah. So let's just take Facebook. You first of all, it's really important to break it up from Instagram and WhatsApp. I mean, this is such an openly lawless company. When you have basically every state AG going after them, one, that it's politically popular, and two, they're breaking a lot of laws and they're doing it pretty openly. But that kind of breakup is important. So at moments where there's where Facebook is promoting certain things, you can say, hey, I don't like this toxicity on this site. I'm going to move somewhere else. And that's not a real option right now if you want to be heard. But the second thing is treat it like a public utility. And I wrote with Sibyl Rahman a piece last year about how we could use public utility regulation. And what that would mean is public utility regulation regulates the business model. So you basically say you can't use targeted ads. That's one. Right. So instead, you would be charged, between $1 and $15 a month to use a social media service like you use your phone service. But instead of having the heart of our communications infrastructure be preferring toxicity, preferring white nationalism, it would have to be neutral, and would also then have to take all comers in a neutral way. So think of it a little bit like a railroad for communications. And one of the things that would do is open up more opportunities for local journalism, because this is a complex machine, and I do want to stay away from organic metaphors, because that tends to make us just throw up our hands and say, well, unless we fix the profit motive, there's nothing we can do. But the truth is that there's actually a lot within the existing system that we can do. So basically, common carriage or public utility, it has to treat all comers equally and can't use the targeted ad business model, and then also can't own different producers who rely on the site, so that there's a conflict of interest. Those are the key elements here. And the amazing thing is that in the report that just came out of the House Antitrust Subcommittee, they're advocating for this kind of model for social media. So it's one of those areas where it really is just going to take Biden and leadership to push it forward. It's possible. It feels like it's too late, but the truth is it's really dangerous. We have to act now. And as Jack was saying, treating it in terms of episodic, like who is banned and who isn't banned, is missing the whole point. It's like the disease is the business model. The disease is the business model. Mm-hmm. And Congress's job is communications like having a decentralized communications infrastructure. Like nothing, clearly that's Congress's job. That's what the first Congress is doing. And that's what the Congress is doing in the 1970s. And that's what Congress should be doing now.
Yeah. And you think that there's any hope? I mean, you seem to be somewhat hopeful while saying it looks like it's too late, but you're saying it's not too late. What can people do? Because, something you say in your book, Break 'em Up, which is a great book, is like, don't feel bad about not boycotting Amazon. No. Because that's just not an effective way to go about it. Does that apply? And that applies to to Facebook. So right.
YouTube is a huge problem. Yeah. But I wouldn't say, hey, get off YouTube and don't have any audience members. Right. You need the audience members. It's like saying get off the roads, but don't complain about the potholes in the roads. Right. So it's just that our habit has become so deeply, like, you may think, oh, you're not neoliberal, but the sort of boycott instinct, like first, you're consumer first, is like, oh, if I have a problem with Facebook or YouTube, my first job is my intimate, personal. It's like my relationship with God first is through my relationship. As opposed to say, call Chuck Schumer. He's the new majority leader. Right. He's holding the cards here.
I also think sometimes, the consumer choice thing makes it so that people are like, all right, I've done something. Yeah, I've done my part. And it's like, it's actually better to keep ordering from Amazon, but force Chuck Schumer to act on them. I was going to ask, Zephyr, what do you think about like Section 230 in this world where we had public utility online social media, and in the short term, what do you think about Section 230 and repealing it or versus reforming it?
Can you explain to listeners what that is?
So, in my 1 minute left, it's and I'd be happy to come back on and talk more about it. But there's a basic idea in law which I find very compelling and I think applies here, which is that something that is promoted, not merely allowed, you have responsibility and you're liable for. So, like, if an innkeeper actively, all these sort of law school analogies are also like weird and 1930s, but I'm going to use it. If
a bar wench,
if you have an innkeeper who actively like sprays the sidewalk with water on an icy day, and then somebody comes along and slips.
Right.
That's really different than an innkeeper who's like, well, I don't know, I don't care about the sidewalk. Once you're inside, you're inside. And
Right.
so the choice to actively do something creates liability. And so I would apply the same principle here, which is that for promoted posts, liability should exist. And so the effect there then would be to discourage the promotion, basically require more awareness around the promotion of posts. I really think the more key thing is starting with the business model. I feel like we're doing sort of patches,
Right.
but a lot of times when people are talking about 230, they're lying, just to be clear, especially on the right.
Right. Yes.
So it's that's why it's a weird area to sort of
Right.
enter briefly.
Well, it's also such a weird thing, for the right to even talk about it, because I'm like, Section 230 would mean that these companies have to moderate what you are saying. They would have to moderate your political ads, but whatever.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I guess the deeper point here, well, a sort of a historical way to think about it is that when journalism started being penny press journalism, working class journalism, which is absolutely essential, journalism that is paid for not by wealthy investors who are waiting to see whether their ship's cargo was not damaged or not, but journalism, working class journalism, popular and local journalism in the mid to late 19th century, a lot of the first stuff was filled with lies, just lies. Like there's People on the Moon with Wings was one of the most popular early publications that went through several different iterations. And the way that law developed is say, okay, well, if you are going to hold yourself out as a journalist, you're going to be responsible, right? So that otherwise we're just going to have lots of false stories out there. And this just goes back to the beginning of the conversation, which is that the platforms are trying to have it both ways. They're trying to claim as a protection, we're just like journalists, but they don't have the obligations that journalists do. And that I actually don't want them to be journalists. I think it's better for them to be platforms, but to be neutral in public utilities, and then actually support more journalism. I don't want, Facebook journalism.
Right. And final, can you just say one statement on Assange? Speaking of journalism,
I have not been focused on this news this last week, and I have to read Matt's newsletter. I know, but so I will go ahead and.
Yeah. But do you generally think he should be free?
I am such a lawyer that until I look at look at what the precise charges are, and I.
Okay, we'll have you back on.
I'm going to beg off. There's a lot that sounds very disturbing about both the reasons given for. I mean, I think it's important to not extradite. These are my instincts.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
But I want to before making a comment, go a lot deeper.
Okay. Yeah. Taking the fifth and then going deeper later.
Yes. Right. No, I'm not. I won't take it permanently. I promise. So.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much. And any other final message you want to tell people?
It's a strange moment because we're beginning the Biden administration. And the one thing I will say that gives me, not the one thing, but one thing that gives me some hope is that in the last 3 weeks, we have seen Biden move on two big things in a big way, on the $2,000 checks and on impeachment. And I've always thought Biden's a bit of a question mark, but the fact that he's moved so quickly twice, even before being president, means that those of us who are activists and pushing know we have our marching orders. This is an administration that may not say it likes to listen, but is sensitive to grassroots activity, which is why it's really, really important to be pushing a very aggressive economic agenda and accountability.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Zephyr. Definitely come back on.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Have a good night. All right. By the way, I can already hear the people in the chat that I'm not looking at. Although, Jack, you got called out. Someone's like, we see you looking at the chat.
Oh, me?
Yeah,
Never.
I know. But
Never.
I just want you to know you can agree with what Zephyr just said and also hate Biden. This is a space. I'm holding the space for that idea, which is true. It's not saying that Biden is good for it wants to do the right thing. I
would say even and I thought it was great talking to Zephyr. I actually do disagree with Zephyr with what she said at the end there, and I think it's totally okay for us to have different perspectives on that.
Oh,
I
right.
still
There's
think it's
that too. Yeah.
I still think it's worth pushing for what's worth pushing for, because what the fuck else are we going to do?
What else can we do? Yeah.
So
yeah.
I disagree with her, but I have a lot of respect for her, and it was great to talk to her.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think you're basic. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, she's such a lawyer that I don't even think she's making as much of a normative moral.
But I do really agree with her about the social media thing and in reframing this conversation, because I honestly think that we've like lost the plot a little bit on this conversation about Trump getting pulled off of social media and stuff like that. And I think that we are on the left now using the like false argument that the social media companies made, like to make profit for themselves. Like, this never was an expression of free speech. Like, these being on these platforms never was speech. It never was even censorship. It's like, these have always been to sell products. The fucked up thing here is that that we have ceded a monopoly of communication to these private companies, that they're using it to sell products. Like, not that like this bastion of free speech, removed fucking carnival barker Donald Trump from it.
Right. Yeah.
Decided that they would no longer profit from Donald Trump's speech.
Right. Man, Jack, you're the reason why everyone doesn't have health care.
Oh, what is it? That's what I hear.
I think that's sarcasm. I do believe that's sarcasm.
Me and Brad, by the way, the thing with me and Brad before earlier, I actually think he and I do agree. It's just like, because of course I'm like, yes, of course they knew about it weeks in advance and they didn't try to stop these people and they're basically on the side. Of course, I'm saying in a utopian world, you'd rather see these kind of de-escalation tactics. But I'm not saying it's like was good for them to use it in this particular instance. I just am like hesitant. I'm like, I could see a world where leftists occupy the Capitol for Medicare for all. And, I think that us starting to make this argument about they should have all been pepper sprayed the moment they got to the steps, I'm like, I disagree with that, because I would think it was okay if we all occupied the Capitol for Medicare for all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think, it's interesting because there's a difference between, again, I think it's a literally fatal combo of not doing enough to stop them from coming in and killing one of them. You know what I mean? Like, it was a lack of preparation. I'm not sure what the response is. I agree that we don't want to empower the police state. In fact, but you know what? Our next guests are so good on this stuff. Wait, you have to go at what time, Jack? You have half an hour more?
I have a half hour.
Okay, great.
A half hour. I got to go at 6:30.
All right, so 9:30 our time. So yeah, you're gonna love this because our next two guests are very good on this stuff. We're gonna take a little break. I have to use the facilities. We're gonna play some video. Unless Jack, I know how much you like to vamp.
I'll take 5 minutes.
All right, take 5. Yeah. So we'll be back, and then I'll go over the super chats, and we will bring on the guests who are great. All right. Okay. Cool. I'm gonna block out my thing. That's okay, because Maria, you can show the video, right?
Convinced about the validity of is the Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. She's a Midwestern regional whip for the Democratic Congress. Congresswoman Omar, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us. You were quite convinced about the validity of impeaching Donald Trump prior to this, based on what is now old news that happened a week ago. What has happened now? How have things changed for you, given what happened on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that there was an abuse of power, and we were in the process of drafting the articles of impeachment. And as the Capitol was under siege by a mob that was incited by the president and our colleagues both in the Senate and in the House, I decided to use that time to update the articles of impeachment and include the incitement of the coup that we've all experienced.
And what do you think now takes precedence? Because it might be that in the minds of Americans, what happened in Georgia was remarkable. And now we've seen there's a second call. And it wouldn't surprise me if we end up hearing about more calls where the president was pressuring people, in part because he's so open about it, even when it's not recorded. But this seems more serious. The leading of this insurrection, this coup attempt that he has been at the head of, seems to be something that fundamentally, goes to the visceral part of our view of what a democracy is.
Precisely. I mean, the president has chosen to send a mob to take the Capitol by force to stop the fundamental process of our democracy, which was to certify election results. This is a very dangerous man. I've said it over and over again, and we cannot afford to really see this man in office any longer. It is indicative of us to fulfill our oath of office and remove this president. The articles of impeachment that we've drawn up that has tremendous support really gets to the heart of why this president needs to be removed. I know that a lot of my colleagues are thinking about whether this they're thinking about whether it is realistic, it's practical. They're thinking about whether it is realistic, if we have any time left to be able to do this, how much is going to impact if this is sent to the Senate during the inaugural period of the new president. But the reality is that the practicality or the realisticness of this process should not stop us from moving forward. This is what we have to do in order to protect our democracy, our republic, and send a clear message that actions have consequences. I mean, we have someone who is working on overthrowing a government. Our capital was under siege. I don't know what could be more important than us standing up for our democracy and our republic.
So I think the point you make about the practicality or impracticality about it, we have to put aside. But a Republican Representative Ken Buck, one of your colleagues in the House, has signed a letter written to Joe Biden, asking him to not support an impeachment. He says, nor does the Constitution envision impeaching a president without an adequate investigation and congressional hearings. A presidential impeachment should not occur in the heat of the moment, but rather after great deliberation. Here's the interesting part. In the spirit of healing and fidelity to our Constitution, we ask that you formally request that Speaker Nancy Pelosi discontinue her efforts to impeach President Donald J. Trump a second time. So putting aside the history of this thing, that impeachment happens by Congress, not at the behest of a president. But this, in the spirit of healing and fidelity to our Constitution, this idea that impeachment would be divisive in the country right now. Your response?
And it's a shameful thing for them to even suggest that we witness a crime being committed against our country, and because we want unity and healing, we should decide not to prosecute someone for that crime. I mean, I can't even tell you just how much of a mockery that makes of our democratic institutions, of our Constitution, of the oath of office that we have taken. I am so ashamed to serve with these people who truly have neglected their oath of office. Begin to tell you, I can't begin to tell you how angry and frustrated it makes me. I mean, we're not even getting to the process of dealing with what has taken place on Wednesday. This is something that has gone on far too long, and I want my colleagues to be shaken and to understand that we have taken an oath of office to protect the Constitution and this country from enemies, domestic, and this is what our country is faced with at the moment.
Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
All right, 10 days left of Donald Trump's presidency, meaning there are 10 days left for the president 2020 election, Senator Bernie Sanders told me that he would strive to make Joe Biden the most progressive president in the nation's history. That goal became a whole lot more plausible this past week as Democrats won both Senate runoff elections in Georgia, allowing them to retake control of Congress's upper chamber, the Senate. A unified government. Imagine that. Now, a lot of the Biden administration's policy plans are likely to come to fruition. So, too, are some progressive policies that previously had little hope of passing in a Republican-held Senate. One of the very first items on the docket is passing and signing a COVID relief bill that includes $2,000 direct payments to millions of Americans. Joining me now is Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator Sanders, good to see you. Interestingly enough, your partner, your Republican partner in trying to get bigger payments to Americans was Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who got really weird in the last week or so. But you do now have Democratic support to get these higher checks. So is that going to be first on your agenda?
Ali, we have to recognize that right now this country faces an unprecedented set of crises. The healthcare pandemic, the economy, climate change, the very threat to democracy. And what has got to happen is, to my mind, the Democratic Congress and President Biden are going to have to move aggressively to address these crises. And that means way up there, first order of business is to understand that people in America are struggling to feed their kids. They're struggling to prevent eviction. They're struggling to be able to afford to go to the doctor. First thing we got to do is make sure that every working class family in America gets on top of that $600 that hopefully many families are now getting. They get another $1,500 per person, including children. Second of all, what we have got to do is not only address the immediate emergency, we got to work on job creation, creating millions of good paying jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure, and addressing the climate change crisis. We can create millions of jobs by retrofitting our homes, moving to sustainable energy in many, many respects.
Let's talk about healthcare. This is the thing you and I have talked about for a very, very long time because we share a view on how there can be a better healthcare system. Obviously, you and Joe Biden don't exactly share the same view of what should happen, but you do definitely share a view that a lot more Americans should be insured than currently are. And that situation has only worsened because of coronavirus, because stupidly we connect healthcare to our jobs in this country. So lots of people have lost their jobs and a whole lot of people got coronavirus, which then puts them into the category of having pre-existing conditions and making it harder for them to get insurance. What's the working solution to this in the immediate and even the midterm future?
Look, Ali, I agree with you. At the end of the day, this current cruel, dysfunctional, and wasteful healthcare system has got to end. We need to do what Canada does. We need to do what countries all over the world do. Guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right, not a jobs benefit. End the absurdity of spending 10 times more in some cases for prescription drugs than do countries all over the world. That has to be addressed immediately. That's my view. That is not the president-elect's view. But short term, what we can do for a start is lower the eligibility age of Medicare from 65. I would go down to 55 in the first year. Joe Biden wants to go to 60. We can certainly expand healthcare coverage in a variety of ways. We can make sure that we have community health centers located, new community health centers all over.
Hello, and we are back, and we are so excited to be back. That was my brother from another mother, St. Bernard. And we're really excited to be bringing on our next two guests. We're just going to deepen this conversation. And who are those next two guests? Well, you may know from the description. But in case you do not know, we are having back return guest Shahid Buttar, who is an activist. He challenged Nancy Pelosi. He's a real nerd, constitutional lawyer, poet. I hope it's okay I call him a nerd. I say that I'm nerd positive. And making her Katie Halper show.
We took back the word. You know,
I took it back. I took it back. I reclaimed it. Yeah. And making her Katie Halper show debut is Greer, a Boston-based musician, activist, writer. She's the deputy director of Fight for the Future, a digital rights group that advocates for a free and open internet and against policies and practices of censorship, invasion of privacy, free speech, and the increasing reach of the surveillance state. And she writes for places like The Washington Post, The Guardian, Wired, and BuzzFeed News. Okay, so let us bring these fine people into the chat. Evan, Shahid, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Katie.
Great to see you, Evan. I haven't seen you in too long.
Yeah, you both are really expert in this field. I wanted to start, I think, with you, Evan, because you have a great piece that you wrote for Fast Company, right?
Yep.
I always want to say Fast Times, like Fast Times at Richmond High. But
Speedy nonprofit.
Speedy nonprofit, yeah. Let me just take off this Katie will be back shortly thing. How do I take that off? Oh, Maria will do. Okay. I want to say hi to Kelly, Maria, and Brad, by the way, who are behind the scenes. So, Evan, let's start with your piece again, which makes a really compelling argument. And it says, I'm just going to quote you if that's okay.
Sure.
More money, weapons, and technology in the hands of the Department of Homeland Security, an agency complicit in human rights abuses long before Trump took office, won't stop the rising threat of right-wing violence. Instead, it will be used to suppress legitimate dissent and disproportionately target Black and brown activists, Muslims, immigrant communities, and social movements that effectively challenge systemic injustice and corporate power. More specifically, lawmakers should reject attempts to exploit the crisis Trump created to further one of Trump's top goals, gutting Section 230, a foundational law that makes it possible for websites to host the content, post videos, photos, memes, and opinions of ordinary people. So, can you, unlike the surveillance state, which we don't want to be expanded, can you expand on that?
For sure, Katie. And, I think there's multiple different things to unpack there. So I'll try not to ramble so that we can get other folks in as well. But, I think the first thing I want to say is this is not a slippery slope argument, right? I hear a lot of folks out there saying, oh, this is a slippery slope argument. No, this is an argument that is directly informed by the lived experiences of marginalized people in this country who have been on the receiving end of an oppressive surveillance state that puts people's lives in danger, that puts people's family members in prison, that has gotten people killed, right? So this is not about kind of waving our hands and saying, oh, but what if they go too far and then my friends get censored? This is an actual, something that we need to grapple with. And that we can't ignore. And, I think the thrust of my piece is that we can't combat individual groups of violent white supremacists by doubling down on policies that are based in white supremacy and uphold white supremacy. So expanding mass government surveillance programs, which have been historically weaponized primarily against communities of color, immigrant communities, Muslims, activists that challenge powerful corporations, activists that challenge the police and the government. Expanding the government's role, or for example, passing a new domestic terrorism statute, where we've seen historically that such laws criminalize, again, those same folks that I was just talking about. Those types of policies are not going to do anything to prevent another display of white supremacist violence, which is what we saw in the Capitol this week. In fact, they will be enacting white supremacist violence on the communities that have already been the most harmed by this administration and by Trump's supporters and their rhetoric, right? So for me, this is not sort of a trade-offs or, kind of a false equivalency. This is literally about not pushing for policies that actually harm the very same communities that those folks that stormed in the Capitol were trying to silence and disenfranchise.
It sounds so. This is, moral kind of like principled arguments aside, and there's a very clear strategic argument about the concrete ways this will be enacted, right? This isn't just a question of where you fall on principles. It's actually a kind of a question of interest.
For sure. I mean, I think it's certainly both. And my headphone fell out for a second there, so I might have missed slight context. But to dive in on kind of the second piece of my op-ed, which I think speaks to what you're talking about, let's quickly touch on Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a great example where we can and should have robust debates about things like deplatforming and what is the responsibility of big tech companies and their surveillance capitalist business model, or things like algorithmic amplification. What role does that play in assisting white supremacists and fascists with recruitment and amplifying some of the worst content on the internet in this never-ending quest for advertising dollars, right? Those are conversations we should have, and we can have reasonable disagreements about where the lines are or what the best policies are to address the harms that are clearly happening, right? We also can't be the party of hands off the internet, everything is fine, and pretend that there aren't real harms that are being done by these massive corporations and their business practices. That said, we should all be able to agree that ripping up Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act isn't going to fix any of those harms. Sort of wherever you land, whether you think that big tech companies engage in too much moderation and are censoring legitimate political speech, or you think they're not doing enough and they should be taking down more accounts, either way, ripping up Section 230 won't fix the problem that you have with these companies, right? And so I think this has been a huge, in a lot of ways, distraction from some of the things that we really need, which I would argue are finally passing a strong federal data privacy law that would ban the type of data harvesting and micro-targeting that these companies use to sort of algorithmically inject some of the worst content into the minds of the people who are most susceptible to it, and sort of gives them their monopoly power. Actually enforcing existing antitrust laws, a host of other options that we have to rein in the power of these companies to break up their monopoly and gatekeeper control, rather than destroying a law that fundamentally is at the core of what enables all the best aspects of the internet, the parts of it that are actually transformative and have given a voice to many people who have been historically silenced in our society and through mainstream media in the past. So, I guess that's my main point. It's like, let's have a real debate about deplatforming. Let's stop fucking like saying bullshit about Section 230. And I would point folks to, many resources and explainers, because in the end, that's one thing, I want to approach the show tonight and our conversations about this with some humility, because I think there is a degree to which, I don't know, I don't genuinely know, whether if I were sitting behind the controls at a company like Twitter, what I would think is actually the best thing to do about deplatforming someone like Donald Trump. I think there's really valid arguments to be made on a number of sides about, where are the lines? When do we approach that fire in a crowded theater, kind of carve out that we all understand to be built into the First Amendment. But I do know that ripping up Section 230 isn't going to make this situation any better. So I think that's a good thing for anyone out there who cares about this to start with, so we can push that aside, so we can actually have the real conversation about what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing.
So you're saying let's table and pause, and there's a lot to talk about, and we shouldn't be scared off of talking about the other stuff about platforming. But what we can all agree on that's not controversial or shouldn't be controversial is this issue.
Section 230, don't repeal Section 230, because this allows for, basically, what would happen if they repealed Section 230 is it would allow them to, sue Facebook over ads and stuff like that. But then also, if a website was hosting leftists and that, people would be held too far accountable for, what goes on their services. And that goes all the way to every type of service on the internet.
Yeah, I'll say one last thing on that, and I want to make sure we get Shahid in and others. But one of the most likely scenarios that I think we are likely to see in the coming weeks would be Democrats to push a piece of legislation that creates a carve out in Section 230 for speech that promotes "quote unquote" domestic terrorism. Right. Mm-hmm. Which on its face sounds perfectly reasonable. Okay, we're saying platforms, are protected from liability. But if people are straight up on there calling for domestic terrorism, then maybe they should be liable. That's sort of the argument behind it. What that would do is it would make it so that any racist asshole could sue Facebook anytime they allow someone to, for example, post a video of police violence and argue that posting that video of police acting violently is inciting domestic terrorism, right? So anything like that, I think, would end up actually crushing the anti-racist and anti-fascist social movements that we clearly desperately need now more than ever. So to make it more concrete, this isn't just about will they repeal it. I think we're much more likely to see kind of these narrow attempts to create carve-outs in it. But many of those carve-outs could be just as devastating as repealing the law entirely. And I think that one is very likely to be coming sooner rather than later, and we need to be ready to wholeheartedly oppose it, and again push for real solutions and real community responses to this very real threat of organized white supremacist violence that is amplified by big tech companies' business models.
And you can take this, Evan, or Shahid, you can take this, but we briefly went over with Zephyr Teachout, who was on before, kind of explaining what Section 230 is. But can one of you just give a summary of what it is?
You're the lawyer.
It's a corporate liability shield. It's a shield for platforms, and it protects platforms that host user-generated content from liability based on content that the companies, did not produce. And that sounds like, on its face, a liability shield for the companies, but it's actually a content moderation shield for the users, because by saying that companies won't be liable for user-generated speech, while companies remain at liberty to moderate content on their platforms because they're not state actors, so they're not subject to First Amendment protections. They can more or less do whatever they want. As long as 230 is in place, they don't have an incentive to actively police user speech. So what removing 230 would do, that's the scenario that Evan's noting, whether it's repealing or carving it out, any erosions to 230 would basically invite companies to more aggressively police, censor, suspend, and ban user-generated content. And that's a huge problem here. A lot of people are responding to any number of legitimate concerns, including, for instance, the completely unreasonable power of tech companies. And it is absolutely true that corporate content moderation decisions are entirely arbitrary. And I would say, frankly, that the ban of Donald Trump demonstrates it. I don't have a problem with it, particularly because he incites violence. And so that's not constitutionally protected speech, nor is Twitter a state actor. But the point of the arbitrariness absolutely sticks, because it's not like he just started inciting violence. He's been doing this for years. Mm-hmm. So why now? Why today? Why, based on a series of tweets that themselves aren't even nearly as incendiary as half the other things he's posted?
Right.
It speaks to precisely the fact that the corporate platforms are run amok. They can do whatever they want. And 230 is basically the last vestige of not giving them a reason to do everything they want, or everything that the government might want. As we're talking, particularly, Evan mentioned the possibility of another carve out to Section 230, and we have seen some already. SESTA and FOSTA were carve-outs to the law that have had demonstrable consequences. People have been placed at physical risk because they've lost access to online platforms that particularly sex workers used to use to stay safe at work. And when we place people at harm through ham-fisted, ill-considered, half-baked legislation, we should learn from it rather than double down on those unforced errors. And a particular carve-out that would address, for instance, content that could be read to promote domestic terrorism. Just to be clear here, domestic terrorism has been held in the past, I'm thinking of the Tariq Mahana case, to include academic translation of Arabic texts. And if the designation of what is terrorism is just random, it's included taking pictures at factory farms. It's included breaking monkeys out of labs. All those things are domestic terrorism, according to our government. And so, people might be responding to Wednesday, but adopting these kinds of overbroad laws does no one any good. And again, there are real legitimate concerns here. I'd love particularly to develop on the theme that Evan raised about antitrust measures that can actually strike at the legitimate concern that people have in a way that better addresses them without creating these unnecessary risks that repealing parts of Section 230 would.
Yeah, and can you explain, that case about translation? Because I don't know what that is, and I met maybe others don't.
Sure, I can jump in on that.
Please, go ahead.
So I worked on this campaign, and in fact, our good friends at Breitbart and the Daily Caller wrote extensive articles about my involvement in this civil liberties campaign in my early 20s. But this was a case of a Muslim man from the Boston area, Tariq Mahena, who was charged and convicted with material support for terrorism. And one of the primary pieces of evidence, or kind of core accusations of this charge, was that he translated a number of old Islamic texts, posted them on the internet. Some of them were then shared by organizations that the US government deems to be terrorist organizations. And so they charged him with material support for basically engaging in academic translation of religious texts. But really, it was about him being a politically active Muslim man who was speaking out at that time. And this has happened, historically a number of times, right? Material support for terrorism has been used to target politically active Muslims in the US, a number of times since 9/11. And I think this is really important too, because we often think of this, there's a lot of navel gazing happening right now on Twitter and among.
Wait, hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Oh, sure.
Okay, yeah. What were you saying?
Oh, yes, we're all gazing at our navel. I'm actually gazing at my hoodie. I have to shout out that my hoodie actually has the text of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act on it.
Might win the nerd award.
Hyping the Fight for the Future
you win the
merch.
nerd award. Yeah,
Good job as our deputy director. No, but there's a lot of navel gazing happening among particularly white leftists in the US right now. And I just think it needs to be said over and over again that the people who are deplatformed on social media most often are politically active Muslims and Arabs who live outside the US, whose speech is caught up in automated removal of this kind of anti-terrorist automated removal programs that are shared across the 4 or 5 major web platforms, right? And Jillian York at EFF has written extensively about this, and others. And then in the US, the people who are systematically deplatformed from social media the most are sex workers, right? And so I understand, people like to cheer on deplatforming when it happens to those who arguably really, really genuinely do deserve it. But again, this is not a slippery slope argument. We need to and must contend with the reality that there is a tremendous amount of harmful deplatforming happening of legitimate political and sexual and other controversial or shouldn't be controversial content on the internet. And the more power we hand to large tech companies and government agencies to kind of make those calls that should be made at a more kind of community-based level, the more danger we put those marginalized people in. And I just think that needs to be said over and over and over again. We want this to be simple. And I see this in my mentions all the time right now where people are like, it's simple, just ban the terrorists.
Right.
And it's just not that simple. I wish it were too. I really genuinely do. But we have to understand how this impacts people in dozens of countries, creating content in dozens of different languages, in dozens of different formats, in jokes, in memes, in videos. It's just not as simple as you want it to be. I'm sorry.
Also, I want to ask, can I just ask a question? Is that, no, if you have a direct response to that, you can.
Yeah, constructive tension. I mean, and I fully agree with the characterization of the Mahana case and generally everything else that I've been saying. The one place where I guess I just, maybe this isn't constructive tension, but this idea that the people who are harmed most by deplatforming are marginalized communities. As a member of one of those marginalized communities, I respect the point, but I think there's actually a much bigger harm here, and it's not to us. It's to all of us, because it goes like this. When we invite corporate interference with speech, which is what any erosion to 230 would do, we effectively constrain political discourse in public, right? We're giving tools, whether to companies or in the traditional First Amendment setting to the government, to silence speech. What that does is force discourse into the shadows. It heightens the narrative of marginalization that the right wing promotes, and it frankly plays into precisely the underlying social pattern that is driving everything from the mob that we saw ransack the Capitol on Wednesday to the attacks on marginalized communities across the country. This right-wing virulent nationalism, white nationalism, is
Right.
fueled by the arbitrariness that corporate content moderation reflects. And so it's not just we who are marginalized on the hook. You know, some people care about us. I get the sense, frankly, most people don't. And so I'm just making the point here that whether you care about marginalized communities or whether you just care about there not being people ransacking the Capitol, we should get in front of these issues by inviting speech into the public sphere. That's the genius of the First Amendment, our constitutional design, the principles. It's a genius of, at least as they were originally constructed, some of these tech platforms. One piece I'd also like to just throw on the table here, it's not as if anybody particularly wants corporate domination of the internet. 230 to some extent is a concession recognizing that corporate platforms have eclipsed the internet that many of us knew in the 90s. And as long as Facebook and Google and Microsoft and the big companies effectively operate walled gardens, it's really important to maintain protections so that users can still access the platforms. I would be perfectly happy with the platforms making their own decisions, except that they've all attained monopoly influence on the internet. And so you don't have a choice. When these arbitrary platforms silence a speaker, it's not like you have opportunities to go in other directions. And this starts to speak to some of the antitrust remedies that I think Congress has.
Well, and quickly, yeah, if I can add to that, I completely agree. And Shahid, thanks for that kind of constructive tension as you framed it. But
I have some more constructive tension, but yeah.
Okay, great. But quickly, I'll also just say that blowing up Section 230 would actually solidify the monopoly power of the largest tech companies, right? They are the only ones that have the money to hire the army of lawyers and lobbyists that would be needed to navigate a world without this basic protection,
really good
right?
point.
So if you are mad at Facebook and Google and you think that their policies are harmful and that they are doing a bad job at moderation, again, in whichever direction, whether you think they're moderating too much or not moderating enough, or whether you don't like their privacy practices or any number of other things that we
or
can
if you think they're leaning to the left or the right.
Yeah, right.
Blowing up Section 230 will make that worse because it will crush all of their competition and they will be the only ones left standing, right? Especially if you look at companies like Reddit or Wikipedia that have a more decentralized model, right? Wikipedia is made by thousands of volunteer editors. In a world without Section 230, Wikipedia would be legally responsible for every single edit made by every single one of those volunteer editors. That's not possible, right? Like Facebook can live in a world without Section 230. It's just that your Facebook feed would be entirely filled with like cat videos and recipes and other things that Facebook is 100% positive can't get them sued.
Right.
Wikipedia can't survive in a world without Section 230. It just can't. So if you want a world where we have only Facebook and no Wikipedia, let's get rid of Section 230.
Totally. And just to, one step on Evan's point, not only will Wikipedia encounter existential challenges, but the next platform that could compete with Facebook or Twitter won't ever come into existence, because if we erode 230, it's also an anti-innovation measure because it subjects basically small online platforms to burdens that only the big ones are effectively able to meet.
Right. I was just returning to that point about how, Evan, you were pointing out how it harms, disenfranchised communities. And Shahid, you were saying, well, it's not just those communities. And for those of you out there who don't care about us, don't worry, there are other reasons to oppose this. But I actually think Evan's point is extremely important, because I think that there are well-intentioned people who think that they are either representing their communities or being allies. And it's really important to point out that while, like people, like you were saying before, people think that this is a way to battle white supremacy and terrorism, it will be, again, the people who are most affected by it. I mean, we see this also with criticism of Israel, right? Or Palestinian activists.
BDS.
They are just like immediately, deactivated. No one says anything about it. But I've a response I've heard to this a lot, and I think I brought this up with you, Shahid, the other day, but is well, who cares, because they already go after the left. They already, are censor the left. So this is just catching up. And what's your response to that, Evan, and then Shahid?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the way that I look at this is that most tech policy over the last couple years has been about working the refs. Right. And we're working the refs in a game that we always lose. And I'll unabashedly say we as the left here, right?
Yeah.
Because we are never going to be willing to be as disingenuous and full of shit as the far right is, right? And so they will create this faux outrage about anything, and then they will go out and do like actually legitimately dangerous, crazy things and cry censorship when they get deplatformed, right? And so I just think we're working the refs in a game that we can't win, and instead we need to be really addressing this with structural, meaningful change that makes it so that a tiny handful of tech bros that live in San Francisco and have billions of dollars are not the referees of online freedom of expression, right? That is just an untenable situation that is never going to be compatible with basic human rights, with freedom of expression, with democracy, with justice. And so, we can work the refs all damn day, but until we start playing a different game, we're not going to be heading toward the future that we want to live in.
Yeah, and Jack has to go, but that's not out of constructive tension.
I have no constructive tension with anyone here. Everyone's so smart, and I actually feel like I've, sitting through these conversations, I've become more educated. So I leave you with no constructive.
You say that's like that as if that's surprising. It doesn't happen every episode. I mean, these two guests are especially praiseworthy. But
I'm just saying, there's no constructive tension. I just have to go make dinner. That's all. No constructive tension at all. The tension. Constructive tension.
Dinner is constructive.
Me and my wife, if I don't make the dinner. So
that's the tension you're preventing by.
Exactly.
Good to see you all. See you later.
Don't come on the show hangry. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, I know. It's preemptive. It's a hangry preemption prevention. It's a deterrent.
I'm trying not to tweet hangry. That's like my new.
Oh yeah, I'm trying not to tweet at all, honestly. But okay, and what about what other issues have come up? I mean, responses to. Oh wait, actually, Shahid, I wanted to share your thread on this.
Okay.
Okay, so Shahid has a thread on this. But while I'm doing that, so you guys know each other from activism stuff, or?
Yeah, we've actually, I think we met originally in the music context, right? But long before we crossed each other as digital rights activists, because we had a chance to collaborate across partner organizations back before I ran for Congress. I worked at the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Right.
And long before that, Evan and I met doing music, right? Wasn't it through Riot Folk and your work, mine as an MC and yours as a musician, I think, where we first crossed?
I think so, yep. Like Encore, many Encores ago.
Yes, I'm proud of that.
What's Encore?
It was the National Conference on Organized Resistance, and it
happened at American University. I have an incredible story from that I had a chance recently to tell. It's random, but I don't know, folks might find it interesting. I had a chance to represent the second mayor in the country to support the right of consenting adults to marry a partner of their choice. His name was Jason West. He was the mayor of New Paltz, New York. And we filed the second case in the country in 2004. I met him on a panel at Encore in 2003, and we were talking about art and activism. He was a puppeteer, still is. He makes big street puppets for street demonstrations, and I organize spoken word artists and hip hop MCs, still do. And so we were talking about that, and come to find out at the end of the panel that he'd just been elected mayor of a small town. And we get to talking after the panel. I just come out of law school. I'm a baby lawyer in Washington, D.C., looking for some way to be helpful. I give him my card. And then 6 months later, he became the first and only official in the country to ever be criminally prosecuted for supporting marriage equality. And Encore just has a really soft spot in my heart, for having introduced me to Jason. So much came out of that conference that particular year. I feel really indebted to the organizers, and I miss that gathering. It was a really powerful convergence of minds.
Awesome. So here's your thread, and shout out to puppeteers, by the way, underrated group of people. The discussion over Twitter suspending Trump seems to have skipped a few beats. Only the state is even theoretically obligated to respect constitutional rights. Corporate platforms are not bound by constitutional limits. Even if they were, Trump's incitements to violence stretch well beyond constitutionally protected speech. If anything, the problem is not the presidential value of Twitter's decision vis-a-vis Trump, but rather its seemingly arbitrary choice over which particular tweets to cite as the basis for Trump's suspension. He has been inciting violence for a long time. Why only now? The reason Twitter didn't act until now is because after Wednesday's attack, a swath of previously oblivious people grew more attentive to facts they had long chosen to ignore. That only demonstrates the general arbitrariness of corporate content. By the way, is the thing I'm showing scrolling down?
No, it's just stuck on the first tweet. I was going to ask if I should drop the link in the chat.
No, I have it, but I was highlighting. Here it is. Crap. Okay, let's start from the beginning. The discussion over Twitter, now is it moving down?
It is now, yeah.
Okay, sorry, it's in the wrong window. The discussion over Twitter suspending Trump seems to have skipped a few beats. Only the state is even theoretically obligated to respect constitutional rights. Corporate platforms are not bound by constitutional limits. Even if they were, Trump's incitements to violence stretch well beyond constitutionally protected speech. If anything, the problem is not the precedential value of Twitter's decision vis-a-vis Trump, but rather its seemingly arbitrary choice over which particular tweets to cite as the basis for Trump's suspension. He has been inciting violence for a long time. Why only now? The reason Twitter didn't act until now is because after Wednesday's attack, a swath of previously oblivious people grew more attentive to facts they had long chosen to ignore. That only demonstrates the general arbitrariness of corporate content moderation. There is an irony here worth noting. Trump recently vetoed the NDAA.
That's the defense authorization.
Right. Demanding reform, right, which what's his name, Dick Durbin, defended so strongly. Demanding reforms to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. He described 230 as a liability shield protecting Silicon Valley tech companies. That's partially true, but only tells half of the story.
And I just want to point out that I quote tweeted Evan there.
I see that, yeah. Very good. 230 is a liability shield for platforms, but its ultimate beneficiaries are internet users. Because they're not state actors, tech firms are at liberty to censor user-generated content, but they historically haven't had an incentive to do so. Section 230 enables that regime. Let's see. Anyone? Should I just?
Well, what the thread starts to go after this is in the alternative. So people are clamoring, I think, for, and from different sides of the political aisle. This is worth noting. You know, the idea of reforming 230 is something of a political football. And it turns really on which way people think the bias turns. This gets back to Evan's point about people working the lefts. And the rest of the thread starts to get into alternative ways to deal with this corporate arbitrariness, rather than remove the liability shield and risk more corporate censorship of user-generated speech. I'd like to see stronger antitrust enforcement, and there are a bunch of ways that that can happen. One of the particular things I get into in that thread, I've long supported a statutory codification of the essential facilities doctrine. The essential facilities doctrine is almost like a lost high watermark of common law, judge-made law. And at its high watermark, it helped do everything from break up AT&T to ensure that railway companies could use each other's bridges to get over rivers. It's an incredibly important doctrine in the law, and it's been abandoned by the courts. But there's nothing to say that Congress can't revive it, statutorily enshrine it, and bake it into the sauce. And if the essential facilities doctrine were law, that could be used, for instance, to mandate interoperability. One of the challenges here, the only reason anybody cares about anybody getting deplatformed is because each of the online platforms are effectively separate walled gardens. You can't just move from one to the other. Like, sure, you can set up a profile, but you can't bring your friends with you or your message history or your content. And interoperability would allow people to do that. And there's no good reason why you can't. The companies have an interest in locking users in, but users and competition, that is to say the goals of antitrust policy, have an interest in ensuring that people can make effective choices. And if you have your choices across a wide variety of platforms and you as a user are empowered to migrate as you see fit, no one frankly would particularly care if any particular platform was arbitrary in its decision-making, because none of them would have monopolies. And so, you know, part of what's happening here is people are falling for a bit of a bait and switch. There's a real problem and they're being sold snake oil. And, you know, so obviously it's not the first time that happened. I saw a bunch of people who, you know, drank a bunch of snake oil stormed the Capitol on Wednesday. You know, and you know, there are legitimate concerns underlying a lot of grievances. And it's important that as we address those issues, that we do so thoughtfully, not in ways that worsen the problems that we seek to solve, and not in ways that create entirely new problems that create any number of risks for any number of people and communities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I that concept of interoperability, just to make it like kind of understandable for folks who are not as deeply nerdy as I love that all of us are. Email email is a service that has interoperability. If you have a Gmail account, you can email someone who, bless their heart, still has a Hotmail account, and they can forward your email to someone who is smart and has a Proton Mail account.
When you said bless their heart, I thought you were going to AOL, but
yeah, so and that's interoperability, right? And if we start thinking about the internet as a place built of protocols rather than platforms, we could actually have a situation where you can choose, where the user has choice, right? Where you could opt into Evan Greer's curated Twitter, where you only get to hear from like trans ladies who love pop punk. Or you could opt into the like free-for-all crazy Twitter, where you get to hear from QAnon. But if you can actually genuinely have some basic control over what happens on the internet, and also where platforms are not artificially algorithmically amplifying some of the worst content for the sole purpose of engagement, because their profit model is based in clicks and advertising, right? And so I think if we can, again, we think of this as a problem that we can solve by giving platforms more power or demanding that platforms wield their power more responsibly. I would like to take their power away and put that power back in the hands of individual internet users to decide what kind of internet we want and what kind of internet will actually serve humanity and serve our children and serve the future that we want to build for them.
And can you talk about what kind of reaction you think is appropriate, like in terms of dealing with the people who entered the building? There's a lot of discussions about surveillance and, of course, the police state, and how do we balance those two things, especially since, again, I am pitching this because my audience is left, so I am pitching this left, but especially since those things, really do target the most marginalized.
I have a hard time not thinking of when we went through this 20 years ago. There were a set of prolific attacks in 2001, and our country rushed headlong into adopting a set of surveillance laws that in 20 years have never been the subject of a transparent debate. I ran against one of its architects, a leader of Congress who just expanded and extended expiring Patriot Act provisions to give Trump more surveillance powers a year ago. And as people are likely clamoring already, Biden has been telegraphing that he'll likely reintroduce a law that was introduced last year and rejected. We don't need new laws on the books to deal with an incident that was already thoroughly criminal to begin with. There are plenty of laws. And the appropriate solution here is to enforce the laws that we have. This was a failure of law enforcement. And the remedy for a failure of law enforcement is internal investigations and accountability, public oversight. Congress's job is to make laws, and to make new laws would simply create new opportunities for the constitutional ship to sink. Ultimately, from surveillance measures to time and place manner restrictions on gatherings, there are plenty of existing tools to have stopped in the law, to have stopped what happened on Wednesday. What happened on Wednesday was not a failure of the law. It was a failure of law enforcement. And that's an incredibly important thing to parse, if only because the solutions to those two different failures point in very different directions. We've already paid profound costs in our civil liberties to ham-fisted security measures that ultimately privilege security theater before real security. And if we want to get to real security, that's going to take a whole bunch of things, including meaningfully reconsidering U.S. foreign policy and committing to human rights. I mean, so many of our security threats are driven ultimately by our own international longstanding abuses. And that's a conversation that we in the United States have frankly never been willing to have. And I think it's due time that we did, while we still clamor to have that broader conversation about our footprint in the world and who we might be alienating by what corporate resource extraction or what human rights abuses where. In the very least, we should guard our civil liberties by not allowing this security crisis to be used as a pretext to just further empower an executive branch that has already and frankly long been run amok.
And if I could jump in on that with a concrete example, right? I got a call from a reporter at a mainstream national outlet today about the fact that it sounds like at least some police departments have been using Clearview AI, which is perhaps one of the most controversial providers of facial recognition software, to try to identify and track down some of the white supremacist assholes that stormed the Capitol, right? And they asked me, what do I think about this? And I guess what I would say is that we're missing the point if we focus on what the state response to, again, this individual act of white supremacist violence is. And we are harming racial justice and basic civil liberties and human rights if we lionize and normalize a software that we know has systemic racist bias baked into it, and that we know automates and exacerbates racist policing across the board. So if we take this moment and we say, well, here's a really good use case for this sketchy surveillance technology, what we end up doing is actually putting more people in prison, feeding mass surveillance, feeding mass incarceration. We already have more people in prison in this country than any other country in the world, right? We are in a crisis. We've had uprisings across the country over the summer around the fact that policing in this country has been upholding white supremacy for centuries, right? And we would be making an enormous mistake if we respond to this act of violent white supremacy by pouring more money and software and weapons into the very systems that uphold that, right? Not all those who wear badges or workforces are the same that burn crosses, but they're all upholding the same system that those who burn crosses are burning them for, right? And we have to contend with that. It's been kind of astounding to see folks, some folks go from defund the police to, cops are heroes and will save us from the Nazis in a matter of hours. We need to stick to our principles and recognize that this is not a new problem, right? That's another thing I think is so crucial. I feel like part of the impetus to say, both on the surveillance side, but also going back to our previous conversation about the internet and speech, but the impetus to say like the internet caused this feels to me like it's about a collective unwillingness to admit that white supremacist violence has been a constant in this country since it was formed and built on stolen land, right?
Blaming the internet is absolutely passing the buck. And you're absolutely right about the longstanding pattern here. And just to extend on that, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you?
No, go ahead.
I see two strands here, just to pick up one with respect to what's driving this knee-jerk inclination towards more security measures. It's just fear. That's not new. And I'll echo FDR here. He said it quite plainly. The only thing we have to fear is that fear itself, because it drives us to make stupid decisions. And I'll remix him with Eisenhower, who told us that remixing profit.
Should do a mashup, DJ mashup of the two.
FDR and Eisenhower mashup. I feel like I should do like a Photoshop mashup would be better than a DJ one. But unless some of them mix some beats, I don't know about. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Eisenhower comes by after FDR. After FDR says the only thing to fear is fear itself, Eisenhower explains that when you remix profit with security, it gets particularly pernicious because people will pay anything for the illusion of security, even when it's not even connected to anything real, and even when it ends up undermining their own rights. And that's the story of the last, frankly, 70 years. I want to connect this back now to ways we might actually move forward. What could we do that is constructive in response to last Wednesday's events? Evan nailed this. There are certainly some elements of law enforcement that have long been infiltrated by organized white supremacist militias. There are documented strategies to infiltrate law enforcement agencies, as well as the military, both to gain access to material, but particularly training. And I want to cite a particular whistleblower. This is a former FBI special agent. He spent 17 years infiltrating white nationalist groups before blowing a whistle in 2004. His name's Michael German. He then worked for the ACLU, for the Brennan Center. He has a book out. He's been warning of the threat of violent white supremacist organized violence, white supremacist violence in the United States for over 15 years. None of this is new at all in any way. It's not even remotely new. And when I talked about it, Twitter, some people growing aware of things they'd long chosen to ignore. It's a pattern, unfortunately, that when people become aware of things that they chose to ignore, then they rush headlong to do something about it. If we want to do something about it, Let's investigate law enforcement agencies across the United States and get the white supremacists out. That's something we could meaningfully do that would actually be helpful here. And it would not just be helpful to security and marginalized communities who otherwise have to deal with these actors. And I'm not for a minute going to say that this is enough, because I actually would like to defund police and shift those resources into better uses. But on the way there, at the very least, one set of actors that's going to be helped when we weed out white supremacist cops are the cops who are not white supremacists, because they all get bad names for it, which is to say everyone should be able to agree on that agenda, that need to launch a sweeping internal investigation of police departments and law enforcement agencies across the United States. That's a useful consensus that I would hope the left could support.
Yeah, I think like in terms of the fear, I do think that there's something I guess that bothers me or worries me, which is that I do think that there are people who think that they're being good like radicals and good leftists and good allies by like saying like, you know, fuck these white supremacists and take them off, you know, block them all up and take them offline. And it's not just fear. It's like they think this is the right thing to do. And they think that this is what being like anti-racist. They think it's what, you know, it's like a woke security state. And I think it's like, you know, I'm trying to call people in. Not so much on Twitter. I call people out. I'll stop that. But but I do call out the people who pretend like anyone who's grappling with this stuff is some Trumpian enabler. So do you guys want to? Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just think there's a number of different things at play here, right? One is that, and let's be real, like the internet freedom space as a whole. And certainly the tech companies themselves and their defenders have systematically downplayed the very real harms that are being done by big tech companies' business models. And they have repeatedly sort of attempted to just be like, no, this isn't a real problem. And so there is a gap of trust, right? Where people understandably just do not kind of take them at their word when they claim to be defending freedom of expression, right? So I think,
just to be clear, I think you'd agree with this. There's any number of reasons not to take them at their word, right?
Right. There's absolutely, there's no reason to take them at their word, in fact. And so I think we have to acknowledge that and accept it. But I think, again, we need to get out of the realm of theoreticals and slippery slopes and actually listen to the people who are most affected. And when you actually sit down and listen to sex workers and to Palestine activists and to Black liberation activists and to prison abolitionist activists and to people who have been on the receiving end of this, of the wrong side of this type of power, then you are forced to think about it in a more complex way. And then you start to be pushed into thinking about, okay, there's a difference between edge platforms like Twitter and Facebook, which are essentially an online message board. And it does make sense to have, or another thing too, is like people are like, okay, we want no moderation. We saw this with Parler, right? As soon as people started posting on Parler, basically like honeypots to get the white supremacists that stormed the Capitol to hand over their personal information, Parler was like, oh shit, I guess we have to moderate. Right. Without moderation, your online feed is basically full of like porn and spam. Right. So like everyone actually does want there to be some amount of moderation, and it's silly to pretend that we don't. Right. But again, it becomes about, is it transparent? Is there meaningful due process? And also, as Shahid said at the beginning, is there competition so that if you don't like the way that one platform is doing moderation, you can go to another? I think, Mike Masnick over at Tech Dirt has written extensively about this. And I think he argues persuasively that doing content moderation at the scale that a company like Facebook would have to do it at is just impossible. And that really the only kind of valid moderation, like terms of service, is you can't be on my platform if you're an asshole, and I decide if you're an asshole. That only works though in a world where we can, where we have choice, right? When we live in, we can't pretend. There's been a lot of debate over the past couple of days about well, is this a First Amendment violation? Is it a Section 230 violation, right? And one thing I I will just say clearly is platforms deciding to not host the speech of anyone is actually protected by the First Amendment. Let's just be very clear about that. They have a legal right to do so. Just because something is protected by the First Amendment doesn't mean that it doesn't have serious implications for freedom of expression. And in a world where a tiny handful of corporations have grown so much power over traffic, essentially, right? And I think there's another thing here where if you're an activist and you've actually experienced the power of using the internet to get someone out of prison or sound the alarm about something and get a corporation to end an evil practice, you're maybe a little bit more sensitive to this because you're aware of the fact that, sure, Facebook is a private corporation and they can technically, legally speaking, do what they want. But if they decide to cut off your campaign right at the height of it, they have effectively kneecapped your ability to have your voice heard and make change because they have so much of a monopoly over human attention, right? So I think so much of these things we want them to be simple, but in the end, it becomes about power and who has power and who doesn't. And we need to be more thoughtful before we just go cheering on those who have power, using their power in ways that we like, without contending with the fact that they have the power in the first place is actually a profound danger to the future of human society and a profound danger to our ability to actually dismantle the structures that have led us to this point, right? And again, this goes back to just, maybe I'm just old and I remember that like these were problems before Donald Trump arrived, and they will be problems after he heads to Mar-a-Lago and spends the rest of his life complaining that the election was stolen from him or whatever he does next. And there will be problems that we need a free and open internet as a tool and a weapon to solve. And if we give up on that, kind of out of a zealous attempt to show our deference to these companies, we're actually giving up one of the most powerful tools we have to hold elected officials accountable, to hold powerful institutions accountable, and to organize against the corrosive and hateful ideologies that we saw on display in the Capitol this week.
Yeah, great. Was it anything? I have a lot more questions, but it's you've been on for a while. I'm really thankful, and I should have you guys back on because I have questions ranging from like Parler to impeachment to criminal justice, how to deal with people, like where should we, all right, I'll ask you one final question. So Gerald Horne was on my show, who's this, extremely wise, prolific historian, Marxist, focuses on Black history. And he was saying, we need to lock up the fascists, throw the book at them, take them off the streets. Again, considering that we think of, I think all of three of us have problems with the carceral state and the prison industrial complex. What should be done about this? Do we, and of course there's the issue of like the affluenza discussion, right? Which is where white people get away with literal murder sometimes. How do we like have this discussion? How do we organize? How do we engage in activism that doesn't just say, okay, let's lock more people up who are not Black and brown? And how does that apply to the people who stormed the Capitol? And
So storming the Capitol is an unambiguously criminal act. Not only is it trespassing, it's arguably sedition. There's the property, destruction element. So there's lots of crimes that those people could be charged with. We long have had, and these are ephemeral at times, but it's really important that we maintain protections against status crimes, which is to say, if you're going to be charged with a crime, it shouldn't be because of something you believe or who you are. It should be something you do. An act can be criminal. Identities, ideologies, persons are not. And we have to maintain that distinction. We also, to this whole point about, recognizing the way that the shoe changes feet, we should be thoughtful in acknowledging that whatever we might do or seek to do to white supremacists, it's going to come back and bite it all at the communities that are array themselves against them. because the nature of these kinds of restrictions on speech, they're always ideologically ecumenical. At least the restrictions are. You know, the shoe changes feet; it doesn't stay on one, and we can't in any way have any comfort presuming that we will always be on one end of that dynamic. I think in terms of rooting out white supremacy, if there is a arena for criminal law enforcement's internal investigations at police departments, there's not a single good reason that anyone in a sheriff's department or a police department or a state highway patrol or the FBI or CBP or ICE or name your agency should be able to surreptitiously participate in militia organizations while wearing a badge. You know, that is a violation of an oath that they all take. And that's something that we should enforce. And that's an existing regulation that is just so lax that anybody can sign up for a badge and still be part of their hate group. And that's an incompatibility that we absolutely are entitled as a polity to enforce, to make sure that the people that we give badges to and give weapons to have a monopoly on the use of force, that those people are actually using that authority on behalf of the public and the state, not on behalf, as it seems was the case with some of the Capitol Police officers, of their friends or their ideological allies or their own right-wing political fantasies. That's, I think, an appropriate place for us to turn to weed out white supremacists in law enforcement. I think that's a overdue, really compelling, and then also somewhat bounded arena with, unfortunately, lots of room for us to run.
Yeah, and quickly, I completely agree with that. And I guess what I would say is we should also separate the legal argument from a kind of a broader moral argument, right? And I think legally speaking, Shahid is completely right. Morally speaking, I think it's important that we separate tactics from ideology, right? Mm-hmm. If people were storming the Capitol to demand that Congress finally pass, for example, legislation to end qualified immunity for police officers that systematically murder people, I would be cheering it on, right, whether it's illegal or not. Right. The problem with what these folks did was not necessarily the fact that they stormed the Capitol or even that they engaged in militant action. It was that they did so to reinforce white supremacy and to hold in place a white supremacist wannabe dictator. Right. And we should condemn them because of why they did it as much as what they did. And I think that that's really important as we think about how we move forward from this. I think it's crucial that, you know, again, to me, it's sort of beside the point whether we do, kind of what we do about these individuals, and more important, how we move forward as a society and what we do in terms of policy broadly. That said, I'll also just say that, you know, I oppose the prison system as a way of dealing with our problems, and I also support harm reduction, right? And while we still have this fundamentally flawed system, I do support using it to the best of our ability to hold people who do profound harm accountable, right? And I think the even more cut and dry example of that is cops who murder people, right? Who should face charges and should go to jail for what they do in a world where we still have jails. But again, I think if we focus too much on that and we spend too much time being like, all right, have we tracked down every single person that broke into the Capitol, rather than focusing on the underlying systemic issues, the underlying collective unwillingness to accept and grapple with the profound threat of white supremacy as an ideology in our country, of authoritarianism as an ideology in our country, I think we're going to be missing the point, and we're going to end up spending a lot of time on policies that do more harm than good, rather than getting to work on the things we need to be doing, like dealing with the impending eviction crisis, getting people those checks that they need to put food on the table for their children in the middle of a pandemic, like passing strong federal data privacy legislation that would actually rein in big tech companies, like scaling back and defunding police and putting that money into community programs that actually uplift communities and start dealing with the deep wounds and harm and injustice that are at the core of what we saw this week. I think, again, it's sort of like responding to 9/11 with the Patriot Act instead of responding to it by changing profoundly our foreign policy, right? That is sort of the situation I think we find ourselves in if we focus on expanding surveillance, expanding authoritarian structures, rather than changing the underlying systems that got us into this mess in the first place.
Yeah. One last thing. I don't know if you guys have to go. One last thing, may I?
Sure, yeah.
Or okay. All right. So I mean, this is going to be controversial, but like, not all the people who stormed the Capitol are the same. And you know, there's white supremacy as a ideology. There's white supremacy as like a structure, and you know, there are people, like I was looking at the footage of something, which we'll get into, I think Wednesday, by the way. But, you know, and some people are like, no, stop. Like they really didn't want people to enter after a certain point. I'm not like glorifying all the people who were storming the Capitol, but I think that it's somewhat at our own peril if we like dismiss everyone who was there or everyone who supports this as kind of on the same level of, and I don't, and it's, you know, I'm just going to be honest. Like, I feel nervous even saying that, like, woe's me. I'm fine with that. But I don't know how to like walk that line of acknowledging real white supremacy, that there are those elements there.
Maybe another element of constructive tension here, you know, in my mind, certainly the white supremacy that people were promoting on Wednesday was problematic. If there was a mob storming the Capitol, even if it was promoting an end to qualified immunity and it was like terrifying legislators and stopping the certification of a vote, I would have a problem with that. As much as I support ending qualified immunity, the mechanism of our democracy is constitutionally supposed to be beyond politics, right? And I do think that there's a huge difference between, on the one hand, people who I might describe as like rubes who were there and they thought they were there to be at a First Amendment action, and they ended up participating in something that got escalated. And then particularly, you know, the figure that comes to my mind, there was an image we all saw of a man dressed in tactical gear, vaulting over a banister with a bunch of zip ties in one hand, very clearly like, you know, a very fit military figure. And the idea that there were people with military training and preparation and tools to enter a hostage situation, and that they came within mere feet and seconds of holding senators hostage. I don't think Americans even still understand how close we came to losing our democracy. And I do think that that is an offense to the republic, separate from the white supremacy. And I think that it's worth disaggregating. The law traditionally requires not just an act, but also a state of mind.
Mens rea.
Exactly. And yeah, this takes me back to one of our very first conversations about the felony murder rule in New York on Veterans Day. You know, but the people who thought they were going to a First Amendment protest, they didn't have the same mens rea, the same state of mind as whatever that guy was vaulting over the banister, getting ready to go take some hostages. And people who are going to take hostages, that's political violence. That is terrorism. Somebody showing it up at a gathering and following a crowd and then ending up, oh my God, what did I end up in? That's not terrorism. That's something very different. And I think it's appropriate to disaggregate the acts and the states of mind. I think it's foolish to lump everybody participating in any group activity together. And I think this is one area where it behooves us to assess who were the people there to do harm, and to particularly focus our attention on identifying and prosecuting and holding accountable those people.
If I can just say one last thing on that, because we haven't touched on it yet, and I don't know, there maybe there's more constructive tension there too. I think it's a real challenge, but I think it speaks to this broader issue, right? Which is that we tend to make really poor decisions for reasons that seem really reasonable on their face, right? And a clear example of this is around encryption technology, right? I've already seen pundits on MSNBC and elsewhere saying, you know, this is why we need the FBI to have full access to encrypted messaging apps like Telegram and Signal and WhatsApp, right? This whole thing was organized in plain sight on social media, right? No amount of additional surveillance or wiretapping or interception of messaging would have prevented this. And it's crucial that we grapple with the kind of messiness of this, because, you know, we're dealing right now with Parler, which is a shit show dumpster fire. But it's only it's not a very distant path from there to saying, well, Signal is an encrypted messaging app where we can't see what's going on.
Right.
People could create groups on Signal where they plan horrific acts of violence. So Apple and Google should ban Signal from the App Store, right? That is, we're like one step away from there right now. And, we've seen the FBI make the exact same argument about encryption in the past, where they've used terrorism or horrific acts of child sexual abuse as an excuse to attack encryption when you can't actually ban encryption. Encryption is math. People who want to use encryption to do bad things will always be able to find encryption to do such bad things. Banning it or criminalizing it simply takes it out of the hands of kind of the mainstream and puts large numbers of people in danger of government surveillance or surveillance by stalkers, harassers, abusers, criminals. And so I just think, again, there is this tendency to, where fringe cases or cases that seem really, understandably horrific, where people are desperate to do something, that is where we lose ground. And again, not in a slippery slope, hand wavy sort of way, in a actually well-documented, recent history way, where we have seen time and time again that we enact policies that do more harm than good if we don't think critically about how they will impact those who are most vulnerable.
Yes, agreed. Well, someone said that they are upset you didn't win, Shahid, against Pelosi. Someone
Life
said
is long, the future beckons.
yes. Last time someone said Evan should run for office. Yeah, and come back, because I have so many more questions and lots of other people have questions, and we didn't even touch we barely got to the surface. But
the sound of an hour well spent. I think time flies.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'll stay on to talk to, answer some questions from guests, and not from guests. Sorry, that would be really funny. Guys, any questions for me?
How's the new year treating you so far?
Is that a real fireplace? I want to know.
Yeah, it is a real fireplace. Yeah. It's not a green screen. Yeah.
Jealous.
Well,
Yeah,
where's Papa Halper tonight? Because I kind of.
I'm being
I gotta
censored
bring my
because I don't
dad in
have a
next
fireplace.
time. I will. I'll bring him in. I'll bring him in to talk about and I'll bring in Bodie next time. It's a little doggy. Yeah. But again, thank you so much. Everyone check out Evan's work and Shahid's work, and come back on.
Great to be with you. Great to see you, Evan.
You too. Bye, guys.
Okay, y'all.
Alrighty. So great show, huh? Great guests. Let's see. There are a lot of questions. Let me just go through some of them. Kudos to Halpy for pushing balance. Thank you. That was from NOK. Brian, great show tonight, Katie. You're an indispensable voice in leftist politics. Thank you. Correct. That is correct. What else? Subbed again to unsub. I'm edgy. Catch up. Thank you, Murphy, for the chat. Okay, I looked at that. You want Katie to yell at you with a megaphone? Join Patreon. It's true. You could join Patreon. Patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Let's see. Brad sent me a lot of other chats. Let me just check them out. Let's see. Okay, Fanto. I fell in a hole upside down as a child. I was crying, help mommy and daddy. They were laughing. They found me an hour later. I'm glad you were found. Dick Long. Jack Long. America is a kleptocracy. Vomit face, vomit face, vomit face. Phantom Fanto. Unsubscribe because Shahid isn't Jack Bauer Dem. Panda, little panda cup. Oh, it's so cute. You need to give people the means to power. CA is trying to recall their governor. That is what you guys need to do locally. Local grassroots actions, protest with your signature, impeach state reps. A long story short, we need a drinking game for every time Evan says white supreme. Oh, Lil Panda Cub, you look lovely today, Kay Halpu, but can you adjust your camera? It looks down on you. Try to make the same angle as your lovely guest. Keep working hard. Yeah, I'm in a different, I'll have it better set up for next week. Phantomas Phantom, my great fear as a child falling into outhouse. We've all been there. Oh yeah, we didn't really get that to this. Shadow ban refugees. Free speech is the right to yell theater in a crowded fire. No, that's not it. Bangu Tekinlop, thank you for the super sticker. Robin Bennett, thank you for the super sticker. I didn't ask them, sorry, about the invasive softwares, but I think we got to that. I'll ask them next time. Big Tech owns Costello writes, Big Tech owns Congress. Big Tech is the NSA. Hoot Burns. Sure, impeach Trump and get 2K M4A, but when we impeach the DNC for Pied Pipering, the orange, before screwing the guy best equipped to beat him, that's Bernie. Vincent, we're in the moment right now, but has there been a discussion yet about how history will view this time? Badly, poorly. All right, I'll ask this question to Shahid. Let me text him, actually, because I feel bad. The question for Shahid Buttar, hold on. You know what? I'll do this. I'll do both of these. Let's see. Talking to Shahid makes me want to go to law school. Who here has seen Waiting for Guffman? Looks like we may be going to Broadway. Okay, I just texted Shahid to see if he'll answer those. Let's see. I think okay, we talked about force the vote. The Justice Scott McCogan, the Justice Dems have been co-opted, Kyle, and those poorly paid workers want their money back. Louise Brooks, they won't do med for all. They will walk back 2K checks. The deplatform, everyone is going to turn into patriarch on steroids. I agree. There are senators and House members who incited sedition and insurrection and violated their oaths. Getting them out ASAP should be priority number one. Election integrity, that was from Sean White and Willis. Election integrity and transparency seem to be something we could/need to unite around. We saw what happened to Bernie. The problem is real. Observer, these amped up dudes read books like Turner Diaries, all wargaming, these kinds of scenarios. Foreign channel. This is why Eugene Goodman deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor and 45's retirement, because we owe him everything. Lily, NGL, the dude who sparked up a doobie in the... Oh, NGL is not going to lie, right? Not going to lie, the dude who sparked up a doobie in the Capitol building was hilarious. Also... Does anyone else think that guy looked like he's from, what's his name? Malone, Post Malone? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? The guy who has the weird outfit on and the horns, like the Viking guy. Doesn't he kind of look like Post Malone? Maria's saying yes. Maria's giving me the thumbs up. So Max Blumenthal, we're going to bring him on. Where's my side bitch, Kelly? Kelly, are you there? If Kelly wants to come talk, we can talk for a little bit. Kelly, give me the thumbs up. Max is going to come on Wednesday. Okay, Post Malone, right? It looks okay. Kelly, you want to come in? All right. Hello. We can't hear her. He said he looked like Matt Karp. I got to get Matt Karp on again. He's swole.
I don't think
he
has
tattoos.
That guy looked like Post Malone. No.
Okay, Kelly with the hot take. Kelly's going to tell me soon. We should watch, what's her name again? No, Max is going to come on Wednesday, guys. Not because I had people who tweeted at me when I invited someone on to debate. They were like, you shouldn't come on you should know that Katie Halper. Did I say this already? I can't remember. I've been talking a lot, obviously, for a couple hours. They were like, Katie Halper had... Max Bloom, Katie Halper, and I think I said this, right? Maria, did I say this at the beginning of the show or Brad? Katie Halper invited. I did, right? Anyway, I want people to know Max is always welcome on the show, and he's coming on Wednesday. But
I thought you just said he was coming right now.
No, did I say that? I meant to say he's not coming right now.
Oh, that's
So we're gonna have to.
the opposite of coming right now. So
That's what she said.
okay, I've been watching The Office as well. Have you?
Yeah. No, not for a while.
Cool.
Katie, can you get on Abby Martin? You mean Abby Martin? Yeah, I would like to.
It seems like everyone's like, "Where's Abby Martin been?" You never have. No one ever has their own. I know she was just.
We had her on during election. Yeah. Any hot cultural takes, Kelly?
Hot cultural.
People may not remember that Kelly is. We didn't do our That Ain't It Chief. You're right. We got to do That Ain't It Chief, which is when we respond to something really bad. I'll do that with Jack. That's not your thing. Jack and I have that special thing. Remember, one of the best times on the show with Kelly was when she was short. Remember this, guys? When she played Grimes for me. And I was like, I was very anti-Grimes. Kelly was much more permissive. I thought that marrying that guy made you bad. Kelly didn't. But then I listened to the music and Kelly thought it was terrible. And I thought it was good. Not good. I thought it was not bad. And Kelly was like, "Oh, no, you don't, like, you're not hearing it well. Like, you don't, obviously, like, you can't hear it. The sounds aren't coming into your, like, the sound waves aren't working on you."
Yeah, like, I think it's like how dogs can hear different. I think that sometimes people are not hearing exactly the same things.
That was gaslighting.
What?
It was gaslighting. Now I'm all distracted about the way my camera looks. It does look down on me a lot.
No, it's okay. It's not bad. You don't look bad or anything like that.
Has anyone seen the show? Have you, Kelly, seen Big Little Lies?
Yeah, of course.
So good, right?
It's from like a long time ago.
I know. Can you get Mike from the Humanist Report on? Yeah, I will. I'll ask him to. Yeah.
Do I think it's so good?
It's so good. I thought the second season. I thought both of them were good.
I think that there are some problems that I didn't think were the best.
You want to see my impersonation of Nicole Kidman on that show?
Sure.
Hold on. Wait, hold on. Let me get into character. Pretty good, right?
Wait, let me think. Okay, wait, let me close my eyes.
And she's always like straightening her shirt. She looks like she has indigestion. You were laughing when I started it, so.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think because she was also because you're talking about a show that was, because I keep up on TV. I used to work in TV review publishing guys. But I keep up with this kind of stuff. And so you're talking about something that's several years old or something like that. And she was just in a new HBO show, which you also have been mentioning, but I don't think you've watched.
No, I have.
You did?
Yeah, The Undoing.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of the difference between those two characters. And yeah, I think that was a good one.
Yeah, it was really good, yeah.
But I don't think the show was... Really? I thought the first season was a lot better than the second.
They need a third one.
I don't think they do.
No, Marie doesn't think so either. I really think they do. I thought Laura Dern was so funny in that.
Yeah, I liked her. That's not her usual character that she gets.
It did not address class. Did it address class? A little.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it did. It did address like their privilege.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like it addressed like it didn't draw like major comparisons.
No, but there was class, and there was like the college education thing, and there was the then what's her name?
Shailene Woodley. I can't
Yeah, I
stand
can
her.
remember her, yeah.
I don't know why. She's just like one of those, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You just like don't know why you don't like them, but you're like see them and you're like, ah.
She makes my skin crawl.
No, it doesn't make my skin crawl. I'm just like, ew. Like,
That's just a Mimi Roca shout out. Call back.
Who's that?
The one who said that Bernie Sanders, I don't know why, but he makes my skin crawl.
Okay, I don't know who that. I don't know who Mimi Roca is, so that didn't help.
What? Oh, well, she was on MSNBC. She's terrible, and she ran for something in one office. Oh, Shailene Woodley is supposed to be redacted tonight. I didn't know that. She's not. She worked at she's a lawyer, like a prosecutor, but she was on. You don't remember that famous clip of her?
The name sounds familiar. I mean, I'll look at her up, and I'm better with faces than names. That's for sure.
Yeah,
especially if I didn't see the name in print.
Yeah.
But okay, this is what I wanted to bring up from earlier in the show, like a lot earlier in the show, at the beginning of the show.
And guys, we're doing a 15-minute thing.
Okay. Why is everyone in the chat being like, shut up, or like you're the worst?
No, I'm tired.
Oh no, I mean I'm just not watching the chat.
Yeah. Everyone's like, if you let Kelly talk for more than 15 minutes, I will unsubscribe. Just kidding.
No, I just mean like if they're like trying to censor me. Because anyway, so no, the Vogue cover thing. So obviously like Jack knew about it, but like I felt like it wasn't being treated well. I mean, it was trending pretty hard on Twitter, even for longer than like, because I mean I love magazines, but you know they're not a big thing in my life, and it's not what I follow anything that I click on really on Twitter anymore. Like everything's politics, or else like I would like have no ability to like function off of my phone if I followed anything else. But yeah, it was trending for a long time, probably because Yashar did the tweet, like broke the tweet. And so yeah, I found the image to be kind of offensive, and then not offensive in the sense that Vogue like makes people look glamorous and or powerful or whatever it is that they're doing, and like they don't light you badly. Like what I mean, that's, and so it's not, the fact that although I do take issue with like, she's not a model. Like if you agreed on a picture for a cover with a model and then you did it with a different image, like too bad. Like but she's going to be the vice president. And I'm not like a Kamala stan by any means. I don't particularly care for her, but yeah, it was a different picture. It leaves a lot to be desired in terms of like being flattering, the lighting, and I don't think it's particularly flattering, and it's not. I mean, she's wearing just normal clothes, which like is fine, but if that's not what she wanted to appear wearing, it looks like a test shot. And like it's sloppy. It's like, I don't know. I feel like it's rude. And then somebody put together like on a Twitter, like a whole like thread of like, covers that they've done with Black women on them in the American Vogue. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. This is
why?
Because they were terrible.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Cows of Panacea, by the way. Katie, thanks for being a real one. Keep doing you and F the haters, from a fellow radicalized West alum. Oh, nice. When do you graduate from Wesleyan? And what was your major? You don't tell me when. Just tell me your major. You also don't have to tell me that, but just curious. Wow, there's a lot of anti-something in the chat tonight. Not sure why. Oh, there's some pushback. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, Kamala Harris, we don't like her. we're kind of ambivalent on the thing, right? What do we think?
Wait, what do you say?
I don't know. What do we think of Kamala? We don't like her. I don't like her. Oh yeah, Kelly, Maria wants to show what Kelly's talking about. Yes, please do. Can you share it, Maria, from your end? Yes.
What do you think of Kamala? We don't like
All right,
her.
so you're gonna share it? I don't have to press it?
She'd use prison slave labor. She's
doing
crazy.
it. Okay.
Well, no.
Yeah, wait 1 second. Excuse me, I'm talking. Remember she said that? Excuse me, I'm talking. Okay, here we go. Thank you.
Wait, how did this in the chat get even started?
Because that's Kelly's tweet. Maria shared it. Let's see. Can we make it bigger? Did you? Oh no, that's not you.
That is me.
No, your tweet there.
I'm retweeting.
I know. So we're good.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
be real. Even if Kamala's cover is fake, the fact that people think it could be real is a testament to how shitty U.S. Vogue typically is, especially with Black women. Let's not forget how Anna did Cardi. What's wrong with that?
It's not that bad. Like, but
That's a
you're
cute
not,
baby.
but it's like also not that good. I mean, it's just not.
Wait, why is there a side by side?
I don't know. Like, you could do so much with Cardi B, and like it doesn't like this. I was just like, are you kidding me?
Maria, do you want to come in? Maria does, right? She does, because she's like behind the camera, like you do, right?
I mean, I get it. Like Simone Biles, like that, like the cover image. You know, I am all for it if that's how she would like to be presented. That like, you know, her musculature is like more powerful than like all of us combined will ever, like all of us, including everyone watching, will ever be in all of time. But it's
do we have the Kamala image? Maria, are you there? We can't hear you. Can you? How come we can't hear you? Do you not want to talk?
Oh no, I was muted because no, we don't have the Kamala one, but I do want to say, like, the lighting, for example, in this photo is not really good, and the fact that they didn't even try to retouch it in post, is so like I don't know. I don't want to be like, oh, put more effort, but it's like, yeah, put more effort.
No, I mean, it's just not what they usually do.
It looks like a Klimt painting.
Well, with the background, yeah, I guess. But I mean, it's just, I mean, I've seen a lot of pictures of her and she doesn't look as good as the other pictures. So like, why is that? That's what my question about all of these people. Now, show the Kamala one.
Okay. Where is Miss Kamala? Maybe she's in this thread.
I mean,
no.
I just can't.
Oh wait, it's right here. Is this one the real one? Or no, wait.
Oh my God, there's shoes.
Because isn't there a
yeah, there it is. That's what they're saying is real.
Yeah. Hold on. Katie, would you consider who's Sammy the Bull Gravano?
No, the mob, yeah, like what's the most famous one?
John Gotti?
Yeah. I think that the Gotti family. So those are the colors of her sorority, I guess. And I guess that's
pink?
Pink and green.
Oh, okay.
And then I guess that like that's the real picture, which like
whoa, wait, that legit looks like a yearbook picture backdrop.
It's bad.
Like they just threw a sheet up?
I don't
Is that real?
That like, I mean, you know Yashar Ali?
Yeah.
So he's the one who is breaking this on Twitter and saying that like like sources are telling him that is real.
It is.
And I don't understand. That came out already? I don't really understand the controversy.
People do not have it in hand yet.
Okay. Got it.
Wait, look, it is real.
Yeah, but what's that one? The other one, the baby blue one. That's what she wants? That's what she likes?
See, it is real. Vogue magazine verified. So this is real, and then this one's real. This one's better.
Of course, that one's better.
Yeah.
So which one did she want? They already tweeted this out. I'm so confused.
Okay, that is like reasonable. So what did they do? Are they doing both of them?
Wait, why
I
is
think
that one
so.
reasonable? That one's weird. I thought she liked the baby blue one.
It doesn't matter. Like, I mean, she should have a say, but like that just looks ridiculous.
That one? I think the other one looks ridiculous.
That one?
I mean,
no,
I guess
I'm sorry.
Kind of artsy. I guess it's
Look,
artsy
I'm
anyway.
sorry, but that one looks more like a magazine cover than, I mean, that just looks like, no.
All right. Well.
Anyway, I just think that like, it's inappropriate. And I also think that she's a horrible criminal.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's what we can all agree on.
She sent Maria's friends and like she sent like all of everybody in California like letters about what's the word?
It was like truancy or like
truancy. If you
truancy. Do you have a copy of it?
No, I don't. But I remember getting it like
that's her big
one
thing.
of my
That
first
prosecute parents for truancy. Yeah.
Yeah, like first few years of high school, and then my mom had to be like, I call and send a note each time she's missed like school, and then
for like one day.
Yeah,
and then she would send like Maria's family a note being like, "You're all going to jail, and then you're gonna lose your job."
You're all going to jail, but I was just so scared when I got it because I was like, oh my God, my parents have to go to like, go to like, I don't know, the courthouse or I don't know what they do.
It was just that automatically they sent it to you.
Yeah, but I don't know why. I had only missed like, I think 4 or 5 days throughout like the whole school year. And then it wasn't even like consistently. Like it was like, I knew people who literally would miss like 5 days in a row or like, whole weeks and stuff like that.
Justice for Maria.
Justice for Maria, yeah.
Not just kidding.
Well, find those letters if you can.
I'll see if I can. My mom keeps almost everything.
Well, you guys, I know this is a short one for me, but I'm trying to sleep better, be more responsible.
Good for you,
and thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for everyone nodding. But we will see you Wednesday, and we will be breaking a good story. Max Blumenthal will be. We may do a special earlier one, but we'll definitely see you Wednesday.
Why are you saying Wednesday now?
No, it's funny. I've never said that seriously. Yeah, it's a joke.
Okay, I was just making sure. Like maybe like
Wednesday. Yeah,
like things happen during quarantine, and then
I turned into a Midwesterner. What do you know? All right, so I'll see everyone Wednesday, if not before then. Okay.
Cool.
Bye, everyone.
I don't know why I said that like that.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Maria.
Sorry.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye
guys. Bye, Maria.
Bye.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.